Good evening, everyone, and welcome from the Chelmsford Senior Center, where we're gathered for the fall session of the annual town meeting. I'm Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford TeleMedia, and we are going to have an interesting night this evening. I've looked in my crystal ball, and for those of you who are dedicated town meeting watchers, this will not go until 11 o'clock. I can almost guarantee it. And why am I so confident? Well, first of all, there's only 21 articles on the town meeting warrant, which is pretty short. 2 of those have been withdrawn. Second thing is there are no zoning or bylaw articles on the warrant this time. So those often take a long time, and those won't be a problem this time. There'll also be a consent agenda brought early on that will bundle several articles together under one vote. These are sort of non-controversial things that happen time and time again. Now, that's not to say it won't be an interesting evening. The magic word tonight is finance. We'll start with the 5-year forecast, which will be presented as Article 1. This is like town reports. And this is where we find out from Town Manager Paul Cohen and John Souza that our finances will be tricky in the years ahead. You probably know that inflation has been going at a 2 or 3 or 4% clip the last couple of years. The town is limited to increasing taxes and revenues by 2.5%. Something's going to have to give, and that's what we're going to find about tonight. There is a couple of articles here that are going to be discussed tonight, up through and including Article 16. Article 17 has to do with, Article 16 has to do with the renovation of 2 of the 5 fire stations in town. That, by definition, is going to be put off until Thursday night. So we're only going to cover up to Article 15 tonight. That argues for a short evening. One of the more interesting, there are 2 here that I want to call to your attention. First of all, there's Article 7, during which the town will ask for $2.5 million from free cash, and there's a fair amount of free cash this year, left over from the last fiscal year, and that will be $2.5 million of that is being asked to allocate for street improvements, and there is a long list of streets that can use improvements. Many, many millions of dollars worth of work await, and every $2.5 million counts. That could be coming from free cash to add to the monies that are already being spent. In contrast to that, Article 6 is a citizen petition brought by Paul Rogazio having to do with a $1.8 million study for what will eventually, a feasibility study for what will eventually be the new Parker School. Rogazio would like that money taken out of free cash instead of borrowed, as he will likely tell us tonight why borrow it when we have it in free cash. So as always, town meeting will be very interesting. You'll hear much about the fire station, maybe even tonight, but the meat of it won't happen until Thursday night. And between now and then, I encourage you to find out about that Article 16, about those fire station renovations. The town has done all it could to get the word out about why it's needed. The cost is estimated to be about $25 million perhaps, which will become a Prop 2.5 override. And so we'll have to see whether the town meeting reps approve it and whether you approve it. When the election comes up on November 5th, it will be question number 6 on the ballot. And so it's incumbent upon you, the listeners and citizens of town, to find out about this bill, this article. Beyond what you hear tonight, on Chelmsford TeleMedia, there is a kind of a half-hour infomercial, if you will, that I hosted to kind of lay out the groundwork for why this is going to be important for the town. They've been working on this for 3 years now, and you'll hear the results on Thursday night. Paul Curlin's calling the meeting to order. Let's go.
Which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, may we have a moment of silence in memory of former town meeting representatives who have passed away since our last meeting. George Ripson, Catherine Bruff, and Norman A. Lebrecht. Would you kindly test your voting devices so we can declare a quorum? And I'd like to state for the record that I've checked the posting of the warrant for this meeting, and it complies with all state laws and regulations. I'd also like to announce that the fire exits are on both sides of this room and also at the entrance when you first came in. And I'd like to remind you to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Also, I've been asked to request that if you have to leave the meeting early, kindly drop off your electronic voting devices with the checkers in the front hall.
On the tally board that there are a lot of blank spaces, and that's because, in part, the town has been unable to attract the requisite 168
I'm officially declaring that we have a quorum.
Town meeting reps for the 11 precincts, and
I would like to welcome Mr. Padula, why don't you do your thing?
Hi, I'm just Pete Padula from Chelmsford TeleMedia, just for your friendly biannual reminder of proper audience input mic usage. Please just step right up to this mic. Make sure you adjust it to the height of your voice and speak in a nice, clear voice. Don't back away. We'll find you. If you back away, we have feedback, so we want everyone to be heard. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. I would like to welcome all town meeting representatives to tonight's meeting. As has been our practice, we have two screens so that all reps may read the articles and any amendments upon which you will be voting. You can also view the slides on the screen on your tablets, laptops, computers, or other smart devices. Simply log on using the instructions on the screen. Speaking of amendments, all amendments will be submitted on the forms which you can get from either the town clerk or me. If you know prior to town meeting that you intend to file an amendment, you can see me or Patricia Zurvis prior to the meeting for the form, or you can email them. So you can email them to me, and I will make the necessary copies and distribute them to town council and the typist so that they will be ready before town meeting begins. And if you get to either of us prior to the introduction of the article, town council should have the opportunity to review the amendment, which will expedite the meeting. This form will create an original in 3 copies. I retain the white copy. The yellow copy goes to the amendment assistant up at that table there. The pink copy goes to the town clerk, and you retain the orange copy for your own records. I want to thank Chelmsford TeleMedia for their assistance in setting up the screens, timer, streaming, and broadcasting this meeting. Here are the rules with respect to town meeting protocol and procedures. All questions and debate shall emanate from the microphone facing the moderator in the center of the hall and shall go through the moderator. Board or committee members, other town officials, or department heads may use other microphones to answer questions or provide information to the meeting. Speakers shall refrain from asking rhetorical or argumentative questions and shall only ask questions seeking needed information. The questions shall be in the who, what, when, where, and why mode. Kindly avoid argumentative questions that start or end with, isn't it true, or wouldn't you admit? I would prefer not to have to rule questions out of order, but I am bound by the laws and regulations that define our conduct, and I will do my best to enforce them fairly and respectfully. I will allow a reasonable amount of time for follow-up questions, but I will have to intervene if any individual is asking excessive number of questions. All presenters of articles shall be limited to 10 minutes, and I shall notify each when they have 1 minute remaining. With respect to discussion, speakers are encouraged to be brief, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes of debate. You should be able to make your points within 3 minutes. If you truly believe that this is not enough time for you to make your arguments, kindly advise me in advance, and I may allow some leeway. This time limit also applies to responding to questions. Speakers should ask their questions prior to engaging in discussion. Making inquiries will not be considered part of the 3-minute discussion limit, unless you've started discussion and then ask questions. Once the clock starts, it will not stop until the speaker does or time expires. I would appreciate being advised that a speaker is beginning discussion. A person should not speak a second time and shall only be given this opportunity to correct or dispute a statement of fact made by a previous speaker. This privilege will be narrowly construed by the moderator. We do have some other rules of protocol. Please do not refer to any prior speaker by name. The proper designation is to call him or her the previous speaker. Please refrain from personal attacks. Challenging or arguing in opposition to another's position is fair game and is what this meeting is all about. Intentional slander against any individual or group cannot be tolerated. Let us refrain from repeating arguments that have already been made, but new ideas or distinctions are welcome and encouraged. Discussion of pending litigation will not be permitted unless specifically included in the warrant article being debated. If during the course of discussion I observe several speakers on one side of an issue but none in opposition, I will interrupt debate to inquire if there are any who wish to express the opposing position or offer an amendment. If there are none, I shall end debate and move the question. If there is opposition, I will move that party to the front of the line and allow debate to continue. I trust that you will all appreciate how this will advance our mutual goal of moving town meeting along. To those who may be next in line, should I ever have to exercise this process, you have my apologies in advance. There will not be any debating from the presenter's podium. They may answer questions, but should they want to engage in debate, presenters would have to queue up in line like everyone else. Transparency and effective governance are the two goals of town meeting. To expedite our meetings without affecting transparency, we have successfully employed a process called consent agenda. A consent agenda allows the representatives to bundle several routine warrants articles into one, so that instead of taking several separate votes on these essentially bookkeeping articles, we take one vote on all of them. The town manager and I have discussed the type of articles that would be conducive to this process. These are articles that generally do not involve any questions or debate and are passed in the normal course of town business. I shall request a motion that the body vote to approve the consent agenda involving the articles to be included therein. This still allows for questions and answers and discussion with the opportunity to add or delete consent agenda articles as town meeting deems best. To that end, I am suggesting that the full consent agenda consist of the following articles: 3, 4, 5, 13, 17, and 21. I anticipate a great deal of discussion on Article 16, so we will start that article at the beginning of our second session. I will also allow reasonable additional time for the presentation of this article. Out of regard for the presenters and your fellow town meeting representatives, I must respectfully request that there be no conversations at your tables. If I can hear background discussions up here, it means that there may be representatives who cannot hear the presentations, questions and answers, or discussion. At the end of tonight's session, I will entertain a motion to reconvene on Thursday, October 24th at 7:30 at the Senior Center. Thank you. At this time, the Chair of the Select Board, Patricia Wojcik, has some commendations to announce.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As you know, our tradition has been at Fall Town Meeting to recognize all town meeting members who have reached a 10-year milestone in their service on this body. Tonight we have 5 members who have reached that 10-year threshold, and I'm going to read the text of the certificate first, and then I'll announce those members who can come up and receive their certificate.
Thank you for catching
So the certificate of recognition is presented in recognition of your service to the town of Chelmsford as a town meeting representative. The community is grateful for your dedication and thoughtful deliberation of issues that have come before town meeting during your 10 years in this position. The example set by you and your fellow long-standing town meeting members serves as an inspiration to all who strive to match your determination and honor this civic obligation. The Chelmsford Select Board does hereby acknowledge the personal sacrifices and extraordinary commitment required to achieve this significant milestone and recognize that this distinction has been earned by maintaining the respect and support of all Chelmsford residents. Congratulations on your many years of faithful and consistent service to the town of Chelmsford. And it's signed by the Select Board and and sealed by the town clerk. And those members who are receiving a certificate this evening are Glenn Thorin Jr., David Rand, Jeffrey David Merrill, Sarah Haven Davis, and James Clancy IV. If those members could come up and receive their certificates.
Mr. Manager, I'd also like to state for the record that I did not mention Article 2 as part of the consent agenda, but since it's an article that's being withdrawn, we'll add that to the consent agenda as well.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Paul Cohen, Town Manager. Article 1 is customary at every town meeting to hear reports of town officers and committees. And this evening we basically have two main reports, and then I'll provide a very brief financial overview of the expenditure of free cash for this town meeting. The first presentation is going to be made by our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, regarding our capital infrastructure work, which basically is reporting back to you a number of major projects in our town public works facilities, highway, and so forth that have advanced significantly over the past several months. And then finally, our Finance Director, in accordance with our town bylaws, will provide a 5-year financial forecast. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'll come back and give a review of the expenditure of free cash at tonight's meeting. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy.
Good evening. So DPW is responsible to maintain and repair approximately 190 miles of roadway, 1.2 million square feet of building space across 28 buildings, including the schools, 80 acres of grounds and fields, and 15 playgrounds across the town. And the capital budget is critical to be able to improve and repair our infrastructure, whether it be a building system project or a roadway repair. With the recent cost escalation and inflation in the economy, there's also an increasing need to increase the annual budget. So here, just looking at the past 5 years, we have, going back to FY 2021, we had a capital budget of $3.8 million. And just this past year, we had an overall budget of $5.7 million. And this is really due to the increasing, the aging infrastructure, the many needs that we have, and also what we're seeing in the economy, the inflation and cost escalation. We also have other funds that we do draw from, whether it be earmarks or ARPA. We have been really fortunate to also have some capital upgrades from ARPA projects. We do track that, $10.6 million. But tonight I just want to give an update on the capital projects that we've been working on the past, really over the past few years. Many of these projects take time, design, planning, implementation, so it can be, within a year or sometimes longer. Just as before I move on to the capital, I just also want to highlight, there's a project that we're all seeing today. We have 2 new air handler units in this room that's focused from an ARPA project, but that just as of last week went into effect, so we're able to have a nice cool temperature today. This body here votes on the capital budget. So I think it is important to come back to the town meeting and just report on some of these progress on these projects. This here is capital fiscal year 25, just a recent list of projects. As you can see, of the $5.7 million, this was actually a total of $11.2 million that we looked at, and then it got whittled down to the projects that were needed, $5.7 million. Of the $5.7 million, a large amount of it is infrastructure. So just 81%, or over 3/4, goes towards maintaining and improving our infrastructure. So I just want to go over, now I'm going to go over a bunch of projects just to give you highlights of what we've been working on really this past construction season. Every year, the town annually appropriates funds to supplement the Chapter 90 funding that we receive from the state to put money into our paving and sidewalk programs. Just this past year, we did over just about 10 miles of roadway and 1.8 miles of sidewalk. From the capital budget is about $775,000 to help supplement that funding. Of the 10 miles of roadway, it was about $3.3 million that we just did this past year. The past couple of years, we've spent a lot of money, funds, whether it be through capital, improving our infrastructure. And there is a warrant article that we'll be talking tonight. Here's an example of Dunstable Road, and thank you to our fire department for their use of their drone. We were able to capture this great image on the left of milling on Dunstable Road. There were many complaints of potholes beginning, after the winter, and Dunstable Road was in need of restoration. It was a milling operation, and here pictured on the right is the construction completed. This was about 1.5 miles of roadway, mill and overlay. Another example is Drum Hill Road paving, about 1/2 mile of roadway. Again, another main arterial roadway in town, and that was also completed really towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, where it was restored. And here's a picture on the left, right near Parkhurst, and then a picture on the right is it completed. And also you can just see in the corner, Parkhurst was just recently completed this past Tuesday night. That also was part of the project. And this is a good example of Old Westford Road, just to show some new sidewalk construction. So now going back 2 years, we have a sidewalk master plan program that we're implementing to better connect the sidewalk infrastructure. And so we did see a Old Westford being also a main arterial road, and there was a need to have a connection between Overlook and Essex Place. So we were able to add a sidewalk here. Pictured on the left, there's no sidewalk. You see a shoulder. And then pictured on the right, you see the sidewalk. This is a really, I think, a great picture because it shows that we've saved a very large diameter tree, and we're able to incorporate a new sidewalk around the tree. When we first looked at this, it was, well, we got to take down this tree, but we were able to work with an adjacent property owner and able to fit in an ADA accessible sidewalk behind this tree. And this is right at Old Westford and Baldwin. So I just want to also give some updates on some building projects. We've been doing some kitchen renovation projects, and this past project was a large project. The high school kitchen renovation project is a $2.1 million project. This was appropriated through fiscal year 24 and amended later that year. It's 5,000 square feet of kitchen space renovation, kitchen space. It was really a full gut. And what it included was not just, it was a full gut renovation, but also it was a reconfiguration of some of the space, the layout, just so that to improve efficiency for service. So this here is a picture of it completely gutted, and they've already been working here. They were working on some of the plumbing infrastructure. And this is here when it was complete. In terms of the scope, this included the installation of an exterior grease trap, new flooring, ceiling, lighting, new equipment and shelving, and then associated with that, all the trades, the HVAC, the plumbing, electrical. So really, it's a great space that we'll don't have to go back to for many years. And this was a very aggressive schedule, really a lot going in this summer, and then finally came online this October as for final completion. We're still going through some punch lists, but it's a great space. Here's another example of it completed. Also have a lot of boiler projects that we're going through in the past few years, including the high school boilers, but a project this summer is the Community Ed and Harrington boilers. These were two separate appropriations, one fiscal year 24, one fiscal year 25. We saw a way that we could combine these to have one contractor. Total cost was $640,000. The existing infrastructure, both had Airco boilers, 2 million BTU boilers, and they were replaced with Lochnavar boilers. 2 boilers in the Community Ed and 3 boilers in the Harrington. We still are going, the schools have heat, but we still are also going through the final completion, which is anticipated for this October. So the last project, or two more projects. One is the high school tennis and basketball court replacement project. This is a $1.3 million project, and it includes the reconstruction of 6 high school tennis courts, 3 basketball courts, and we took the 2 deck, and it will be a warrant article on for tonight. There are 2 deck hockey courts, and we are looking to potentially move that over to the McCarthy project, but we're able to incorporate 6 pickleball courts, which is really great. There's been more of a need in town, and we get a lot of requests on how we can incorporate pickleball courts. So those will be going, those are just about being completed. So here's a picture of before DPW. We were able to go in this past winter. We had a relatively mild winter, and we were able to do some demolition of the existing courts to save money on the project. So here's a picture of the demolition. And then here's a picture of during construction. And again, thank you to the fire department for taking some of these aerials with their drone. This was really an interesting project to see because I had never seen post-tension courts, and so this is really a state-of-the-art facility. And here is the near finish completion, looking just at the tennis courts. The basketball courts are in pavement, and just this past week we've finished the surfacing. We still are doing some final items, fencing. There's still some of the line work to go on the pickleball. So we're looking at an end of October completion, but we will be doing a spring, just because of the weather, a spring 2025 opening. And I also wanted to highlight some of our sewer work that we've been doing. Sewer is funded through our sewer enterprise account, so not directly through the $5.7 million or the capital budget that I showed you, but it is voted on as part of at town meeting. This body votes on it, and we have a total of 41 pumping stations across town, which is really a very large number. I actually think we might be one of the largest amount of pump stations that we have across the state. Of those, we still have 7 pump stations remaining that we have to do some upgrades. What you see is a lot of our infrastructure is below ground, so we want to bring some of the controls, the generator, and put them in what I call it a shed. You see pictured here on the right. It's just better access and for the controls. We have new submersible pumps going in each of these pump stations. So this is we have 7 pump stations left. After this will be 6 pump stations. This is Mylan Pump Station. This was about $900,000. We just reached substantial completion this October, and we actually are already moving forward on our next project. So there'll be 6 left, and that's on Kensington Drive. So that's a summary of a lot of the work that we've done really the past, especially the past construction season. We still have a lot of projects that are still capital projects that we're going through that are in the design phase or being designed. We have a lot of roofs and elevators. So pictured here we have McCarthy roof replacement, the school admin building roof replacement, and 54 Richardson Road, the old DPW roof replacement. These are all in design. We also have a lot of elevators right now that we're going through in design. We have elevator replacements at the high school, McCarthy, Community Ed, town offices, senior center. And these are all part of the capital that you've voted on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and you'll be seeing more of her this evening as we go through some new requests. Right now, I want to bring our Finance Director, John Souza, up to the podium. John will be presenting our required 5-year financial forecast to you this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, I'd like to provide you with some highlights of our 5-year financial forecast. In this presentation, we'll take a look at revenues, expenditures, and the overall forecast for fiscal years 26 to 30. Under revenue, looking ahead for fiscal year 26, our largest source is local property taxes. Property taxes support 77% or over 3/4 of our town, 3/4 of our town budget. So I'd ask you to please keep that in mind as we get further into the presentation. Under state law, we start with our levy base of $123.5 million, which is a historical figure based on the prior year's levy limit. We add the 2.5% increase. We add estimated new growth of $1.9 million, and then we add excluded debt service about $262,000. And that gives us about $128.8 million, which is the total that we are allowed to raise through property taxes. If we go to the next slide, our second largest revenue source is state aid, and Chapter 70 aid for education continues. We're projecting an increase of $400,000 for the coming fiscal year, which is just under 3%. For general municipal aid, we're projecting an increase of just under $200,000 or 3% based on prior year trends. And it's important to note that at this time of year, this is all subject to change. Our next revenue source is available funds. As many of you know, these are a collection of various reimbursements from special revenue accounts and revolving funds. We usually include a child care revolving fund reimbursement to cover the health care costs for those employees. And we also include a $2.3 million transfer to fund debt service from sewer betterments and sewer capital construction funds for the final phases of the sewer project. And then the last category of local receipts is, last category of revenue, is local receipts. Motor vehicle excise taxes account for over 50% of our local receipts. And we're anticipating that motor vehicle excise tax will increase $200,000 in the coming fiscal year to a total of $6.1 million. So that gives us total local receipts of $12.9 million, which is an increase of about 3.5%, as you see on the slide. And so if we bring all of those four revenue categories together, you can see that we have budgeted revenues of $167.98 million. Now we'll take a look at expenditures. So for general government personnel, the forecast includes step increases for eligible personnel and a 2.5% cost of living allowance. Most other expenses are estimated at 2% unless otherwise noted. For the Chelmsford Public Schools, we're estimating a $3.5 million increase for the coming year. And for Neshoba Valley Tech, we're estimating about a 5% increase. Next, we'll look at debt service. So our debt service is broken down into three categories. We have excluded debt, non-excluded debt, and betterment-funded debt. And I want to call your attention to the fact that the excluded debt service numbers in the forecast that I'm presenting do not include any possible future debt exclusions. They only include the outstanding bonds for projects that we've already approved. So if we move on to this chart, just because it's a little easy to see and you have the numbers in your materials, excluded debt service is shown in red on the chart. It currently stands at $1.1 million this fiscal year. Next, it will continue to borrow roughly around $5.8 million annually for our capital improvement program. And then the last category, betterment-funded debt service, is shown in yellow. And as the name implies, this is used to fund the final phases of the sewer project. And it's part of our long-term financing plan. That category of debt service will remain near $2.3 million for fiscal year 26, and then decline to $1.65 million the following year. You can see it trending down over time, and it will be paid off completely by 2031. On the next slide, we're going to shift gears and look at employee benefits. So our Middlesex retirement assessment for FY26 increases over $1 million or 8.4%. This assessment is based on the most recent actuarial valuation that Middlesex Retirement had completed as of January 1st, 2024. During the next fiscal year in 27, the cost increase for our assessment is 6.6%, and that's closer to the trend that we've seen in past years. The actuarial study projects that the system will be fully funded by the end of fiscal year 2036. For health insurance, the budget for active employee health insurance includes an estimated increase of over $1 million, or 10%, for fiscal year 26. That percentage increase is much higher than what we have seen in recent years. This is based on current guidance from our insurer, and we've been informed that it's the result of increasing costs and utilization for medical services. And I do want to emphasize this is a projected number, but it's the best data that we have at this point. More recently, we were notified about significant premium increases for 2 Medicaid supplement plans that cover retirees. One increases just under 20%, and the second plan increases over 31%. This results in a projected increase of about $801,000, or 22%, for our retiree health insurance in the coming fiscal year. So if we look at this next slide, this shows all of the expenditures by function, and you can see that the total for all of those categories is about $160. I'm projecting that we'll have a deficit of around $2.5 million for the coming fiscal year, and then you see, which is about a 1.5% of budgeted operating revenue. In the next 4 years, I'm also projecting deficits, and I want to talk more about that. At this point, there are a few uncertain factors that could have a big impact on the budget. One we touched on earlier is the level of state aid. We'll know much more after Governor Healy releases the state budget and state aid figures in late January. The health insurance premiums that I talked about, our current year health insurance budget is just under $16 million. So every 1% of the premiums go up is just a little under $160,000. So you can see what these numbers are really, why they add up so quickly. On the Neshoba assessment, we'll have more detail on by late January, early February. And then finally, inflation's something that's continuing to pressure all areas of the town's operating budget. And we'll take a little more detailed look at that. So this slide shows the U.S. average annual inflation rate. And as you can see from the figures on the slide, the rate of inflation is gradually slowing over time. However, the problem is that we've experienced, if you look at these numbers, we've experienced rates of inflation that are above 2.5% for about 3.5 years now. So those higher prices have become baked in, if you will, to a lot of the goods and services the town buys, higher labor costs. And so that's what's creating the pressure in the operating budget. At the same time, thinking back to slide number 1, our main source of revenue, property taxes, is constrained by the limits of Proposition 2.5. So you can see why slowly over time, more and more pressure has been built on the operating budget. Next, we'll just take a look at reserves. Our financial plan includes maintaining a healthy stabilization fund and dedicating reserves towards stabilization and extraordinary capital. The town ended fiscal year 24 with just over $4.7 million in free cash, which is an increase of $1.85 million from last year. I do want to mention that we know that free cash amounts vary from year to year. It's important to remember that the town received a one-time $1.1 million building permit payment for a development that's under construction on Princeton Street, the former UMass Lowell West property. So if you subtract, you can see that a good amount of that increase in free cash resulted from that one-time payment. Here's a history of free cash since 2016. You can see that as a percentage of general operating budget revenues, this year's amount, $4.7 million, is just under 3%. Next, we'll look at stabilization. So this chart shows the history of the stabilization fund since 2012 and the updated plan going forward. We closed the fiscal year in June with a transfer in of $907,000. And one of the things I wanted to mention, it's important with the times that we're entering that we continue to do our best to maintain strong cash reserves, since we'll definitely be facing some fiscal challenges in the years ahead. Stabilization reserves are something credit rating agencies such as Standard & Poor's pay close attention to. By maintaining our stabilization reserves, we're able to retain our AAA bond rating, reduce our long-term borrowing costs, and it gives us the financial flexibility to respond to any unforeseen emergencies. And that concludes the 5-year forecast.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. And then the last slide and last item under this presentation this evening is the, if I can get this to work. John, can you advance the slide for the, okay, hold on. The last slide will be the proposed allocation of free cash at tonight's town meeting. As John mentioned, it's $4.7 million. As has been the custom, we do not use the cash as a source for recurring positions or recurring costs. So we'll be presenting articles this evening to deal with, as you can see listed there, our sewer construction stabilization fund, which is a requirement of the funding plan for the sewer project. And by state law, we're required to appropriate that at every town meeting because it can't automatically go into that fund. And we're proposing $2.5 million in roadway and sidewalk construction, $975,000 for the recreational area at the McCarthy School, $300,000 for document digitization, $75,000 for a tree and invasive species program, $100,000 for the schematic design of the South Row School roof replacement, and finally putting $560,000 into the general stabilization fund to bring our reserves closer to the high point of the 10% policy of the town. Because as noted, we are heading into a very difficult financial period, and by having this adequate stabilization fund balance, it allows us to weather any unforeseen costs that arise or issues. It also allows us to be a little less conservative in our revenue projections, knowing that if we're closer, because we are going to be looking at operating budget reductions in services in the years ahead, just like we saw our neighbors in Westford and Dracut and other towns around Massachusetts. These challenges that John described are not unique to Chelmsford. They are the situation of the reality that 2.5% in a period of high inflation doesn't balance when you've got the cost constraints that you're experiencing as consumers in the community, whether it's your auto insurance, your grocery bill, and so forth. Again, those items carry over into the town as well as an operation. And finally, what you won't see listed here, and it'll come up later, is there is an Article 6 citizen petition article that proposes the use of free cash. If that were to pass, we would have to modify this plan, and I would propose that we would remove that offsetting amount from Article 7, the roadway and sidewalk construction. So, Mr. Moderator, with that concludes the presentation under Article 1.
Thank you.
Questions permitted?
Normally, we don't allow those. These are just reports. What is your question, Mr. Draymond? First, identify yourself.
Alvin Draymond, Precinct 7. Simple question was, a percentage increase was indicated for almost all the expenses except for the school. Could you please give us what that is?
Yeah, I believe the school is around 4%, and again, they're preliminary projections. Because one thing that isn't in place, and it shouldn't be overlooked, is at the end of this fiscal year, meaning the year we're in now, that's going to expire in just over 8 months, all the town's collective bargaining agreements expire. So we have no labor contracts that are going to start in that fiscal year 26 that we'll be budgeting and working on the next few months. So the numbers for the schools and the numbers on the town side are uncertain at this point. The difference is, and why the school number is higher is, unlike the general government side, under state law, the school committee does not return to town meeting for approval of labor agreements. So we have to put a number in their contract that allows them to bargain with their collective bargaining agreements in real time. And if you've been following what's going out in the municipal landscape, that's a real challenge. So yes, the school number is higher, and it may not be able to be attained given the uncertainties that we have going forward. So that's a long-winded way of answering your question of around 4%, but we just don't know at this date with any certainty. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which are Articles 2, 3, 4, 5, 13, 17, and 21. Do I hear a second? All in favor? Use your clickers, please.
Bad habits. This is Kelly Beatty for Chelmsford TeleMedia. This consent agenda is a relatively new way to bring together a series of articles that are likely to be not controversial. Any of them can be discussed individually if the town meeting reps want, but consent agenda is a way to quickly step through a number of less controversial warrant articles.
The consent agenda passes 116 in favor, 3 opposed, no abstentions. Mr. Manager, will you
Sure.
present the consent agenda?
Right. The first item on the consent agenda is Article 2. This was a citizen petition from Mary Donovan regarding a pet cemetery. Mary Donovan reached out to me, I think about 2 weeks ago now, and regrettably was unable to be here this evening and expects to return at Springtown meeting with her request. So that's why that's on the consent agenda, is for the town to officially take no action on this article. Article 3 is an article that appears almost at every town meeting. This has to do with the Cemetery Improvement Fund. This is where the town transfers monies from the sale of graves and lots for cemetery improvements. And the Cemetery Commission this time is requesting $60,000 for work at 3 of the town's cemeteries. The first one is at Pine Ridge Cemetery to complete the paving of the cemetery expansion project. The second is over at the West Chelmsford Cemetery to do some drainage work. And then the last one is at one of the oldest cemeteries at Hart Pond. They're going to do some work at one of the cul-de-sacs to expand the cemetery space to create a dozen 2-grave lots. So that's the presentation under Article 3. Under Article 4, this appears at every fall town meeting. As I mentioned a few moments ago in my overview comments, the town's sewer construction project, and John pointed out in his presentation, the betterment portion funded of this project, includes the interest earnings on the betterment funds that come in. And under the provisions of state law, if there's no explicit provision for interest earnings, by law those monies go to the general fund. So every year, as we have for the last, I know it's been the last 18 years, and it was before me, last 20 years, the town treasurer calculates the amount of interest that was earned in the prior fiscal year, and we transfer that funds as part of that funding mechanism. The next article is I'll just give you a sense of that, is the current balance in that fund is $3,076,000, and again, with the additional transfer in, that will again be part of the funding schedule, where you can see, as John showed earlier, the project will be entirely paid off by 2032, which is not that far away. The next article is Article 5. This is another no-action article. This was a placeholder when the warrant was signed by the board just after Labor Day. We kept the placeholder, as we always do at fall town meeting, if there's any action to be needed to the town's budget that was approved by this town meeting back in the end of April. And again, there's no adjustments to our operating budget. So with that, we now move to Article 13. Please be patient with me. It'll take me. There we go. Article 13 is the golf course netting and pole extensions. This is for the work at the golf course off of Park Street. The funds come from the golf course operations, which is why it's its own enterprise fund, retained earnings. And what you see here is we have a request to extend the netting on the first tee, as you can see in the photo. So basically, to the right, you can see we installed netting over a dozen years ago at that first tee. Unfortunately, the advances in technology in golf clubs and golf balls have resulted in balls basically overshooting the netting there on the first tee. And that creates a liability for the town because there's residential properties to the right of the first tee, and that legally creates a trespass if the ball goes over there and either damages the property or injures a person that's out there. The neighbors have been patient, but they want action. We've worked with the golf course management company. They've satisfactorily addressed this issue at other golf courses. So what we'll do is we're going to put pole extensions that will go up 30 feet. The first 5 feet attaches to the existing poles, and then you extend it up another 25 feet, and then you put up the netting, and that really should solve virtually the entire problem. So that's what would take place under Article 13. We now move over to Article 17 as part of the consent agenda, and we'll get there in just a moment. There we go. Article 17 is the Community Preservation Fund. This is rescinding an unexpended appropriation of $100,000 for a facade improvement program that was approved at town meeting basically 5 years ago. Unfortunately, we were struck by COVID when this fund was approved, and then it never took. The program was offered out to property owners in the center and in Vinyl Square, but after 5 years, the decision was made to basically just return the monies back to the Community Preservation Fund for another purpose. Article 21 is the final one, and that's a street acceptance. And what that is right here. It's Parkhurst Road. Parkhurst Road, as you're probably aware, is not a new roadway in town. However, when Public Works was out doing roadway and sidewalk improvements, they came across the fact that the road had never been accepted legally by the town. And that creates some issues. One is we want to have those roads approved and recognized, because the amount of length of public roadways that are accepted by the town determines how much state funding we receive from the state as part of Chapter 90, your gas tax distribution. It's based partially on roadway miles. It's also based on population and number of employment in the community. So basically, this is a roadway that extends between North Road and Drum Hill Road. Here's an overview of that area. It's 0.64 miles. The only thing it doesn't include is the layout underneath Route 3. The state retains that area for itself. And so, as you can see, in the state, in order for us to accept this and submit this to the state for approval, they will no longer take maps from the 1930s or 50s that reference stone walls and trees and so forth. So the Public Works had to go out there over the last few weeks and do some extensive survey and planning work for this effort. So that's the final action under the consent agenda, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Articles 3, 4, 13, 17, 21, and takes no action on Articles 2 and 5.
Does the Select Board have a recommendation?
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Articles 3, 4, 13, 17, and 21, and took no action on Article 5.
Any questions or discussion regarding any of the articles on the consent agenda? There being none, now will be the time to vote on the consent agenda. A yes is to approve all of the articles, and a no is not to.
I'm sure all of you will be surprised to learn that Parkhurst Road was never accepted as a street here in town. So we have all learned something historic tonight. We're happy to report that Parkhurst Road, by virtue of this vote, will be part of the town. This consent agenda has proven itself to be a real time saver. At times when the town meeting warrant is lengthy and pushing into a third night sometimes. Won't be so important this time around for the fall town meeting.
The article
but useful
passes,
nonetheless.
117 in favor, 2 no votes, and no abstentions. So we will now move on to Article 6.
Oops. Article 6 is a citizen petition article. Paul Regazio is advancing to the microphone.
Good evening, everybody. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Ragazio. My wife and I have been residents of Chelmsford for over 55 years. And again, I have been an active town meeting representative for 5 to 10 years, and mostly concerned with expenses and the tax rate. During my working career after graduation from Boston College, just to give you some idea of my background, I worked as a CPA, earned my CPA license many years ago, worked as a CPA for an international auditing company, then as a chief financial officer for an international corporation, and most recently as an international controller for a local medical supply company. So finance runs deeply in my veins. In my personal, just as a basic in my personal career, I would never borrow money or enter into a bank loan if available funds were available. And again, this is the situation we have here. We're trying to borrow money when we have available funds. My petition relates to the $1.8 million feasibility study for the new Parker Middle School, which was passed at the town meeting this past May. And again, it was passed with bonding approval, so we could fund that with the bond debt. After the May town meeting, I questioned the town office as to what was the expected surplus for the current fiscal year that ended in June of this year, and the indication was it was going to exceed $2 million. At that time, as we now know, what that surplus is $4.7 million. And again, at that time, I filed this petition to use the surplus to pay this debt and help us in the future for our financial stability. And as you see by one of the presentations by the town manager, the town has already identified spending the $4.7 million. And again, that's what I have objection to. I do agree with the plan to spend the $2.5 million for the roads, as the town does need road repairs. And again, the $200,000 that goes into the sewer fund, that's a necessity. But that leaves roughly $2 million left to be expended. And the town, as was presented, has already indicated applications of that, and I disagree with that. The town is expected to pay $975,000 for a play field at McCarthy. I think that's a luxury that the town cannot afford at this time. And again, why are we adding $500,000 or $600,000 to the stabilization fund at this time? Why not use the $975,000 plus the $560,000 going into the stabilization fund to fund this, feasibility study? There's no need to enter into more debt. As our treasurer showed, we're expecting financial deficits of $2 million, $4 million, $6 million over the next several years without avoiding tax increases. We would have to need a variance on the 2.5%. And regarding the playing field at McCarthy, if the Parker Junior High project goes through, I got to get my place here, sorry. If the Parker Junior High project goes through, that may mean that McCarthy either may become surplus. I don't think that would be, but it would be one of the options would be that would become elementary school and the lower grades. So is that playing field really needed? We have one that we just built at the high school. Is that needed, and can we afford it? That's the big question. And my answer to affording it is no. So why not use the remaining $2 million to fund the Parker School project and avoid the future debt? And also with the future debt becomes interest costs. So we're not talking about $1.8 million of future costs. We're talking about another $200,000, $300,000, or $400,000 of interest on that debt. And again, why add to our projected deficits in the future? That's my main reason. In addition to that, the deficits that the treasurer shows, that does not include funding for the proposed fire stations that we're planning to address later this year, later this week, and also it does not include the significant expense for replacing Parker Junior High School. So again, we're in a financial strait. Why are we spending money on things that we can defer? My article merely requests that the town fund the Parker study of the $1.8 million by a transfer from the the roughly $2 million of surplus funds that's now available to us. Let's be responsible parents. Let's be responsible adults and parents. Let's not push this debt off to the future. And again, I know when I appeared before the Finance Committee and the Select Board that they both voted this down. But again, their vote does not carry weight today. The vote for funding this feasibility study is up to you. So I urge you to pass this amendment that avoids this roughly $2 million of future expenditures that we can avoid. And let's stop, one of the things too, each year we come up with a surplus. They talk about, I've tried in the past to have money returned to the taxpayers to reduce the tax. That has never happened. They also always figure out ways to spend it. Why not use the surplus in the future years to pay down debt? Okay, that's an option. And again, so again, I ask you to approve this article, save some costs in the future from us, so please approve this Article 6. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends against approval of Article 6.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends against approval of this article.
Any questions or discussion?
Moderator, through you to the speaker. I'm sorry, Will Wagner, Precinct 3. You threw out a whole bunch of numbers there that we're currently using free cash for, and you have this petition to use our free cash to spend down for the Parker Middle School feasibility study instead of using it as...
Are these questions?
Yeah,
okay.
Yes, I'm leading up to the question.
Okay.
So this proposal is to spend the money out of our free cash for the feasibility study instead of the way it was allocated in our lists to begin with, correct?
Yeah, rather than borrowing money, let's use the surplus funds that are on hand.
So my question is then, all of the things that the town intended to spend that free cash on now cannot be spent for. And so I honestly think that this is, unless you have also come up with a proposal to modify the spend of free cash, is there an actual amendment on spending it? Because I haven't seen an amendment to This isn't the amendment. This is
This is the vote to vote on. If you vote on...
But what about all the other stuff that's already there is my question.
That would probably go away, with exception. There may be a couple of the smaller, $100,000 or $200,000.
Mr. Motor, perhaps I can have the town manager answer this, or one of the finance committees. If this is approved, and we take the $1.8 million out of free cash, what happens to the proposal that's already in our packets of the spend for free cash? Because we've already allocated how we intend to spend it, but no one has proposed a different spend for what's in our proposals.
Well, one thing I can say is...
Mr. Ragazio, the question has not been addressed to you. It's been addressed to somebody else.
The answer is whatever the town meeting decides. I did the courtesy of placing his article first, because if I put it afterwards, there'd be no free cash left.
Right.
So I thought the appropriate thing to do to honor and support, this is a citizen form of government, and we encourage petitioners, we encourage initiatives and suggestions, and so basically if this is approved, we'll take the 4.7 million, we'll subtract 1.8, and then when the other articles come up, I will amend those articles to reflect what's left in cash, and I think, as I said earlier, what I would recommend and what I will propose, if this were to pass, would be to reduce the road funding from the $2.5 million down to $700,000.
Thank you. That answers my question, and I appreciate the fact that this is brought up before the other free cash. My concern was that I didn't see an amended proposal for the free cash spend already presented, and this being presented then changes the upcoming free cash spend.
It depends on how the town votes on it.
Yes.
Okay.
If this is approved, it
right.
changes it. So that being said, I'm done my questions. You don't have to start the clock because I'm just going to say I recommend that we turn down this petition. I don't think that this has been fully thought out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire Janot, Precinct 4. Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple questions for the town, I guess, for the town manager. Has the money been bonded? We approved bonding of $1.8 million last spring. I assume that's not bonded yet.
No, the answer is no, and we won't begin to expend the $1.8 million till February, basically about 5 months from now. Right now we're in the project eligibility phase with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. We've been notified that we've completed our submittals, but we don't anticipate approval from the MSBA according to their schedule until February, and at that point we will draw down the $1.8 million, so we'll be bonding it this coming summer.
Okay, thank you. And secondary question, don't go away yet, please.
Well, I'm not the petitioner.
I understand, but I'm trying to refresh my memory on the way this ends up flowing. So MSBA moves at its normal scheduled speed. Right. You guys will actually bond it next summer.
We'll
probably with
temporary
bonds at a lower rate, and then turn it into permanent debt eventually. Right. When would MSBA reimburse their approximately half of this?
Oh, not until the project is completed would we begin the permanent issuance. They've told us not to expect a project on this till probably 2030.
Okay.
In terms of when we'll get the earliest we can vote for the Parker Middle School would be the summer of 2 years from now, basically 2 years from now, summer of 2026. If that's the case, and we're approved by MSBA and the town approves it, yep, we would then go into the construction phase of the project, and just as you noted, much like we would with the feasibility study, we would do temporary borrowing for the actual construction and not permanently bond this till 2030.
So are they still not reimbursing until the end of the project?
Right. We can submit partial submittals.
Okay.
But because we were doing temporary borrowing, and then that borrowing would probably be over a 30-year period from 2030 to 2060.
Okay. And what term would we borrow this $1.8 million for?
Same term as the entire project.
Okay.
Because it's a related cost to construction.
Mr. Moderator, these are really all questions, I promise. We've done this in the past to bond feasibility study funds.
Yes.
Did the project come to fruition? No.
No, that was back in 2004.
And I
so
felt
20
the
years
same
ago.
way, Miss. Okay, so
Yep.
thank you for your answers. Start the clock. I felt the same way many years ago when we bonded long-term the cost of a feasibility project when we never knew if the feasibility project would be feasible and come to fruition, and it turned out it didn't. I know we have to do this phase in order to get to the place where a project's completed, and I fully support getting this done. I think that Mr. Regazio is raising a fair question about bonding something that may be on the debt schedule for 20 or 30 years and may not result in the project. And you try to match your borrowings to the life of the asset you're funding, and in this case, it's not really adding up and has precedence for not adding up, not necessarily because the town has done something wrong, but because you can't promise state funding on school construction projects that are very worthy, but the state has 1 million of them and they only have a little bit of money. So for that reason, I don't support bonding this. And since the funds are available, I support using the funds that are available from free cash. In this case, we also know from the FinCom's book, the same language that's there every single year. Free cash is to be used preferably for one-time costs. I went back and did a little research on roadways, and I'm going to tell you that I agree with many people that the roads need a lot of improvement, and I applaud the efforts to try to find the money to cover $5 million a year of cost with not enough from the state and not enough from the capital budget. But we have a capital budget committee that spends a lot of time evaluating what our DPW director said, which is $11 million of requests this year coming down to try to fit into, even though a growing capital budget, still not enough money. Roadways is always part of the capital budget. It is not an annual operating expense in our budget except for the 700. It's not an annual, it's a capital
1
item.
minute.
So now we're talking about a recurring capital expense being funded by free cash instead of one-time expenses like what I completely support, recreation and activity for the courts, because a full town serves all our needs, all our citizens' needs, and there's nothing wrong with pickleball courts, in my opinion. But even though I don't play. So anyway, I would urge you to give some support to this and support the town manager's recommendation that we reduce the money from the roadway money this year, which is getting a largesse. And just to clarify in 9 seconds, it has never been this big, and it's only in the past 4 years that roadway funds have come out of free cash. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 9. I also support...
Are you on debate?
Sorry?
Are you in discussion, or do you have questions?
Oh, I could ask a question.
Well, I just didn't know what you were doing because you said I support, so I'm just curious.
That would be debate. Yes.
That would be your question?
No.
Okay, so are you asking a question or are you going to do debate, Mr.?
I'm supporting the article, so that's debate.
So I should start the timer.
Sure, if you want.
Thank you.
I also support this warrant article. Free cash is kind of found money, and it's nice that we wanted to fill in some of the road work. Heard a discussion a few nights ago that our roads are in such disrepair that it'll cost $75 million to put them back into good shape. So we have a long ways to go. The small amount here out of free cash isn't the right spend. I agree that we do need to do this project. We do need to do the feasibility study, and we have the available cash right now. So Mr. Gazio is exactly right. If we spend the found money here, if you will, for this year towards this project, we don't have to worry about the next 20 or 30 years for the bonding and the interest rates. And I just had some CDs due, and even the bank, the credit union, if you will, isn't willing to do a 13-month CD at the current rates. They're only looking out 3 months. This is 20 years out, and I remember 2004 as well for the high school project. We borrowed money when, at that time, we didn't have a lot of free cash, but this time we do. And I loved the pictures of the sidewalk work going around the trees and not tearing them down for sidewalks. There are other ways to do those road projects that don't cost as much money. We don't have to tear up all of Yancey Road, just the part that's a mess, rather than running the entire sections, and the town manager did that a few years ago. So we can save some money there. So I think I'm going to vote yes on Mr. Gazio's project, and I appreciate you looking at the funds as a CPA and as a gentleman that's done this for a lot of years. Appreciate that a lot. I would like some of the streets to be fixed. I kind of lean towards not doing the McCarthy project if somebody has a street or a sidewalk that's going to keep the kids safe. However, I got up to just those two projects, $1.5 million that we can pull out of free cash and use it that way instead. So, Mr. Gazio, thank you very much for coming to town meeting and offering this as a petition to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Latina.
You may start the clock. Glenn Thorin, Precinct 7. Again, this was a very interesting proposal, Mr. Gazio, so I had to think. And it's always good when something comes up like this, it makes you think. But one thing I thought about is I've been here in town meetings since 1989. And one thing that's impressed me is that the town knows how to manage debt. And debt is not a bad thing. If you manage it properly, you can get debt out of control so that you have no ability to maintain your bond rating. A lot of things can go wrong with debt. But this town has done an extraordinary job managing future debt. And so what we've heard earlier from John Sousa and others is an example of where the debt has been, where it's going, where the debt is being decreased and so forth. So I thought that taking the wisdom of the town treasurer and the town manager on how this money, especially the free cash, should be used in the future is a very important thing. Now, if I thought the town was managing debt poorly, I might take some of the things that you said and try and act on them. But I think the town is managing debt very well. And if you look at the reports from the town, I hope you see the same thing. So I think some of the roads in town are in great disrepair. So when I saw the amount of money that was being put into road repair, I said that's a pretty good idea, because there are some roads that are breaking apart. There are some roads that have holes in them. And I wouldn't want to see that amount of money removed from road repair when we need to keep the infrastructure in the town in good shape. The recreation facilities at McCarthy, I know there's probably going to be an enormous amount of students and citizens of the town that use those. And to just say, maybe not do those is a poor idea. So what the town manager and the town infrastructure team has done is looked at the overall town and say these are the priorities for where the money that we have available is going. And lastly, if we want to keep a AAA bond rating, taking the money that we might put into the stabilization fund and putting it someplace else is, to me, a really bad idea. Because there's not a lot of towns in Massachusetts that have a AAA bond rating. If we keep that rating, the interest rate on future debt will be less. I like that part. So I believe the town is wise in how they manage the debt. The Finance Committee and the Select Board has also given their opinion that the way it's currently structured by the town manager is the right way to go. And I'm going to vote against this article.
Thank you.
Doreen Deschler, Precinct 9, you can start the clock. I think that in today's economy, where we don't know what's going to happen, we're in limbo. The debt is climbing from the state to the federal. And yes, our town is doing very well with their debt, but what's coming up is bad. And I think that we should be fiscally responsible to our younger group of citizens who are going to have to pay off all our debts. And if we don't have to pay interest on something, why should we do it? Why should we make an extra bill? Why pay interest when we can get away without paying interest? Okay, So my thing is be fiscally responsible. If it was you, if you had money in the bank to pay for something to get it done, to get like your kitchen remodeled, and you had cash to pay for that, wouldn't you rather pay the cash to get it done and over with and not have to worry about interest down the road and all the payments you're going to have to pay and if the interest rates go up and all that? I think fiscal responsibility is what we need to think about, and I myself approve this article, and I ask that you do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alvin Draymond, Precinct 7. I agree with a prior speaker that the town has done a fantastic job managing debt. I disagree with that speaker who said debt is not bad. I believe the debt, for the most part, is bad. Therefore, I do support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Claire Janot, Precinct 4. Am I allowed to speak a second time? I'm just confused. But
Claire, you've been up before?
I was. May I speak again? I think the prior
Well,
speaker was also up
only if you're
before.
going to correct something that someone else has said.
A correction is a matter of opinion, but in my
Well,
mind,
I
yes, it's a
understand that.
correction.
But if you tell me what you're going to correct, and
I'd like to enhance the prior speaker's statement about our bond rating and stabilization fund with some facts.
Okay, keep it brief, please.
I will, thank you. So our stabilization fund, the way it's currently proposed, putting $500 and some odd thousand of the free cash, the remaining balance not used, into it this year is going to be at 9.7%. And by changing, whether it's a change to the stabilization fund or a change to the roadway money, we're still going to be a very well-stabilized community, and to feel like somebody's talking about scare tactics towards our AAA bond rating was a little disingenuous and upsetting to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Badri Uplipan, Precinct 11. I have a couple of questions. I don't know who to ask, but maybe it's the Finance Committee, Town Manager, and DPW.
Can you please speak up, sir?
Yeah. The first question is, what's the approximate modeled bond interest rate and interest payout over the duration of 34 years or 30 years or whatever they ask?
John, when I talked to John Souza
now, Mr. Ocasio, who are you asking that question of?
I do not know who should answer that question, so if maybe it's Town Manager or Town
Okay,
Treasurer.
then I just want to make sure who you're asking.
Whoever knows the answer best as to what they have modeled it for 30 years.
At this time, we do not know whether the school would be bonded for 30 years is the maximum. I would want to do some analysis and look at, traditionally what we've looked at in the past is, although costs are going up, is you would want to look at 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, see what makes the most fiscal sense. You want to be able to accommodate the principal payment, but you also don't want to spend unnecessary money on interest. So I could not give you the term of the bond at this time.
And the town has not modeled this at all at this particular point, and it will do so only at some future date.
Mr. Moderator, through you, we don't have the project scope. We're in a very preliminary stage, so I mean, I could sit and figure out what 1.8 million would cost over those terms, but we don't know the exact the cost of the school yet, and we don't know what makes the most sense for a bond period at this time.
This is for this $1.8 million. Are you saying that you would bond this through a temporary through 2030 and then bond it with the actual asset for another 30 years? Is that correct?
What we would do is, Mr. Moderator, through you, what we would do is we would issue temporary borrowings or bond anticipation notes, commonly called bands, for the period of time up until the school, until we do the permanent financing for the school building. And then it could be then rolled into that. So that's why we don't know the exact time. So it would be carried on bond anticipation notes for a period of time.
Okay. So so the summary is no models have been created. Mr. Rogazio, to the presenter of the article, have you modeled approximately what would be notionally different interest rates for this particular band plus permanent asset?
No, I have not, but I understand the current borrowing rates for the town is between 3 and 4%, and that's what I base my. So if we're borrowing $1.8 million over 20 years, that's an average of $900,000 over those 20 years. If we're paying 3% interest, that's $270,000. That's $27,000 a year. Times 20 years is $500,000. Times 30 years is what? $600,000. So that's what we're adding to this. And again, as John said, it would be a short-term borrowing initially for the stabilization, for the feasibility study. But once the building or once the school has been approved, it would go into a 30-year bond. So we're talking a long time borrowing this amount of money, and the cost is a heck of a lot more than the $1.8 million that we're talking about. We can save all that interest by using the surplus cash.
Okay, Mr. Ragazio, I believe you've answered the question. You're getting into debate.
Second question is probably to DPW. Of the 2.5 or odd number that's been allocated for road repair, what is the estimated lifetime for those road in terms, estimated lifetime for those road improvements?
So roads typically 20 to 30 year replacement. Depends on the deterioration of the road.
Thank you very much.
May I correct something here that I think has happened?
If you're going to debate, Mr. Ragazio, you have to get in line like everyone else.
Okay. Is there any more questions?
Thank you very much for the clarifications. I don't have a recommendation. I'm still doing the math in my head at this point, but I'm quite surprised that we do not have a cost model sensitivity analysis for the bonds that we are going to take out, and public to know that. Yes, we can do the math, but at least we should have historically good data on what is the amount of debt that we would take. Just with the confusion caused, maybe my knee-jerk reaction is, let's vote for this amendment positively, because the town hasn't done the models. This may be a better way, because we don't know what the additional models are going to be for the future. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Claire Jeanette, Precinct 4. I just want to point out one other thing to the body.
Now, hold on. Remember, you've already spoken twice.
There's nobody behind me, sir.
I understand, but the rule is that you only talk once unless you're going to refute something that someone else has said.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. Reader knows you can speak twice.
I'm sorry, Mr. Latina. I make it very clear in my opening statement. Okay? A person should not speak a second time and shall only be given this opportunity to correct or dispute a statement of fact made by a previous speaker.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. Page 39, item 11. A person should not speak a second time until everyone in line has an opportunity to speak.
I understand, but I make the rules, Mr. Latina, and I've made.
The rules are written, sir.
I'm going to construe this as narrowly as I've told people. You've had your 3 minutes, Ms. Janot. Yes.
George Zaharos, Precinct 2. I yield my 3 minutes to Ms. Janot.
Okay, go ahead, Claire.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So, my issue with all of this, I completely understand why things happen in the sequence they do and why last spring the choice was to bond. I am not pointing fingers at the way the town has presented any of this to us or prior votes we've taken. However, I want to point out to people that when we look at the article for the allocation of free cash, Article 14 is for the South Row school roof schematic design, $100,000. Therefore, in this same article, we are using free cash to fund a design, which is not a lot different than using free cash to fund a feasibility study instead of bonding a design. So why not take this opportunity tonight? Thank you.
Thank you.
No other questions?
Tom Amaro, Precinct 5. I have a question. I don't understand how it can cost $100,000 to do a design. Aren't you talking about actually doing the roof at South Road? Well, but we need to know what the free cash is going towards, and I don't understand why we would put $100,000 of our free cash to just do a design. How could that cost $100,000?
Okay, you've asked the question. Let someone answer it.
Yeah.
This will be discussed later in an article, but we do have some data. We do look at the MSBA as to recommendations for design, for feasibility. So for the roof, we are estimating it could be upwards of $100,000. It is its preliminary estimate. Also, the South Road roof does have solar panels that have to be taken off and put back on, so that is a large component of the design as well.
Well, okay. I mean, I can understand it would cost money to take them off and put them back. But just to say you're going to do that shouldn't have to cost us money. Anyway, just my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Eric Hansen, Precinct 11. I have a question for the town manager. Question for the town manager on the use of free cash. Does free cash need to be spent by the end of this state fiscal year?
The answer is no. Okay. What the town's custom and practice has been since over 2 decades is to put any balance in free cash into the stabilization fund. You say, why do you do that? Under Massachusetts general law, free cash and the general stabilization fund can both be used for any lawful purpose. The difference is free cash requires a majority vote. To expend from the stabilization fund requires a 2/3 vote. So that's why the town has always erred on the side of conservatism and put any free cash into the stabilization fund to require a 2/3 vote.
Okay. And a second question to that is, if there's a surplus of free cash or unspent free cash in this current fiscal year that isn't appropriated either to the stabilization fund or any other matter, what becomes of that money?
Sure, it becomes the starting point for the subsequent year's free cash. Okay. So if we didn't spend any of the $4.7 million when the town accountant closes the books on June 30th this year, you're going to have, you should use the technical term, which is undesignated fund balance. So she'll have an undesignated fund balance that will be the starting balance, and then whatever occurs within this financial year would then modify that basis. So basically nothing would happen to it.
Okay, understood. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Anderson, Precinct 6. I have a question. I'm not sure who can answer it for me, if it's the town manager. So it was mentioned that if we take the $1.8 million, if we vote for this, we have to obviously take it from somewhere else, and the thought process is to take the whole thing from the roadway and sidewalk construction. How does that get decided?
Town meeting decides that. Okay. What I make is a recommendation and a motion. Town meeting can decide to amend it, approve it, whatever. So as I said earlier, it's ultimately the town meeting's decision.
All right, because I was just reading ahead, and it mentioned that we're $75 million behind on the roads. So my road is due for 2026. Who knows when that will actually be. Anyways, I assume also, this is another question, all of these things, all of the money that has been chosen to be spent on free cash are things that we actually need. We're not spending this just because we have it.
It's a recommendation, and yes, it's based on the amount of free cash that was certified. As the DPW director mentioned earlier, and I think the finance director mentioned in his presentations, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of unfunded infrastructure needs, whether it's roads, facilities, and so forth. It basically comes down to a judgment call. And basically, I put the ball in play by presenting articles on the warrant and recommendations. They then get reviewed by the Select Board, Finance Committee, but ultimately you decide how it gets needed. So, right, if the free cash came in at $3.6 million, it'd be a $3.6 million list. If it came in at $5.4 million, there'd be a $5.4 million list. Basically, it's unfunded needs. And to answer your question, well, why this proposal, the biggest concern that we receive in the manager's office, select board's office, is on the conditions of the town's roadways.
Exactly.
That's why we've done this over the past few years. We're responding to the needs of the citizenry.
But in actuality, we do need all of the things that are listed here. Other than maybe, could we not put the money in the general stabilization? I don't know. I'm not a finance person, but I'm just going to be a second here. You can start the clock if you want to, but the way I look at it is if we need everything and we choose to take the $1.8 million and get rid of it, that means we basically either have to butcher the roadways or pretty much get rid of the entire recreational area and the general stabilization fund. And I don't know about you guys, but I have Japanese knotwood or knotweed or something that grows through cement. I don't know if any of you guys have this. It grows through your cement, so this tree and invasive species plan is actually kind of important to me. Might sound dumb to a lot of people, but it does affect your property value if you know that it's damaging your house. So I feel like all of these things are needed, and I completely understand where you're at, that you don't want to borrow money that we have, and at the same time, we need everything. So it's going to be a tough decision. I don't have a do this or don't do this. I think we're all going to have to make our own decision, but thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being...
Hi, Courtney Cooper, Precinct 11. I guess you can start the clock because I just want to make a statement.
Okay.
My only thing that I just want to say is there was a statement earlier saying we could take this 1.8, not bond it, and save all this money in interest. But the one thing that I want everybody to remember is that, sorry, I'm a little nervous, is that we may be saving the interest, but it's not, you can't say apples to apples, right? So we may take away that roadway of $2.2 million and you save the money. But in the end of the day, when we go to actually do that road, it could cost us $3.5 million, like with inflation, and I know construction costs like through the roof. So you can't just say we're saving that $900,000. So I just want everybody to know that like everything else was going to cost us if we continue to push it off. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Teberty, Precinct 8. This is actually a public service announcement. The Venture Troupe is going to leave shortly, and if you want to get anything to drink or eat, you have about 5 to 10 minutes left. I kind of was waiting for the vote, but I don't know when it's going to happen, so you got 5 to 10 minutes.
Excuse me, Paul Regazio, Precinct 2. I'd just like to correct a couple of things. There was, as I mentioned in my presentation, there was no intent on my part to remove the funding for the roads. The $2.5 million I think is needed. The $1.8 million that I'm suggesting, if I had to make a choice, the $975,000 for the recreational area, we can postpone that. The $565,000 going into the stabilization fund, and the other, the $300,000 for the, the records. That gives you the $1.8 million. So again, just satisfying. One other point. Interest. Interest is in an economic definition of interest for those that are here, it's 2.3% rental fee plus inflation. That's why when you buy a house today, you're talking 7-8% interest on a loan. It's the 2.5% rental fee of money plus whatever the inflation rate is. Okay, so that's what, and if we borrow this money, we're going to be paying 3 to 4% on that debt, and we may be paying it over 20 or 30 years. That's a hell of a lot of money. And again, in our own personal lives, there's all things that we need. I'd like to take a trip to Florida. I'd like to see the Panama Canal. There's always, we may need a new kitchen. There's always things you need. It's your priorities. And my priorities is let's avoid this debt, okay, which we have. We have the cash. We postponed the recreational area. We used the surplus cash that went into the stabilization fund, and I picked the $300,000 for the records. That's not touching the roads. So again, I urge you to vote this. At some point in time, this town has to be expense-minded, has to control. We're running out of money, and this is an opportunity to stand, okay, and say, no, we can't afford it. So I ask you to vote for this option and let the town decide what remaining they will consider to use for the next 3 or 4 articles. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, there being none, we're going to vote on Article 6. A yes vote is to take money out of the free cash, $1.8 million, and which was designed for the town meeting for the feasibility study of the Parker Middle School.
So I think you can see the tally board showing substantial support for Paul Regazio's article, but not enough to pass it. It raises the issue of whether the interest that we would incur would be worth incurring. You know, as was pointed out, one of the things that is working in the back of our mind is bond rating, and whether the town is seen as managing its money well.
Abstention. Manager, Article 7.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 7 is a request to fund roadway and sidewalk construction. The request is to transfer $2.5 million from free cash for that purpose. Our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, is going to come in and provide an overview, but basically, as you can see on the slide as introductory, our Chapter 90, which is the state-funded roadways to communities, which comes from your gas tax, has been level funded at $200 million for the past 12 fiscal years. And as you can imagine, the purchasing power of that over 12 years has significantly decreased. We receive $1.157 annually in that state funding. We also, since they've approved the fair share or / millionaire's tax, the state has provided the town with an additional $500,000 in funding. However, this only represents about a third of the funding that is required to maintain the town's roadway and sidewalk infrastructure. In addition to that, we do fund $775,000, as was noted earlier, for sidewalk and roadway construction in the capital budget. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Christine Clancy, our Public Works Director, who's going to give the overview of what's ahead for these funds.
Hello. So what's been mentioned tonight is we have a $75 million backlog in to rehabilitate our paving and sidewalk. We have a sidewalk and both a sidewalk and paving master plan, and we do update that annually to pick the next roads or the next sidewalks or new sidewalks that we have to add. Of that, we have 187 miles of roadway, 46.5 miles. $2.5 million. This would allow us to continue, just like what we did this past year, almost 10 miles of roadway. So as you see right here, I mean, this is estimated $4.1 million of a list of potential candidates, we'll call it. We would also look at sidewalk candidates. We have Turnpike Road, Parkerville Road, partially that's funded through federal, and Main Street that is amount to $2.8 million. As far as this list, we do update our list annually, and it is published over the winter. So right now we're ending the construction season and just starting to look again, because really roads deteriorate about 2.5%, but they deteriorate at a different rate depending on how often it's used. Also, sometimes there could be other utility work or other reasons why a road deteriorates at a faster rate. So we do look annually and publish this list annually. So with this $2.5 million, really as much needed as you've seen in the past 2 years, how much paving we have been doing to really, I guess, better to improve our work towards that $75 million backlog. And as also mentioned earlier, roads have a lifespan of 20 to 30 years, so really it's a continuous need, a backlog that we'll continue to work at. Thank you.
Thank you. Does Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 7.
Does the Select Board have a recommendation?
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 7.
Questions or discussion?
Mr. Manager, to you, to the DPW chief, please. Christine.
Please identify yourself, Mr. Fall.
I'm sorry. Thomas Fall, Precinct 7. Last year we voted funding for sidewalks and roads. And if I'm correct, you've told us tonight that we're in the middle process of funding a road that hasn't been approved. Correct? Parkhurst?
Sure, so I can clarify that. So Parkhurst was not Chapter 90 eligible. So we have different buckets of funding, including capital. So it is it's within our town right, but it was town right of way, but it wasn't formally accepted through the state process. So it was not Chapter 90 eligible, but we did use capital to pay for that.
There's other roads on there I noticed have been going on for years, I seem. When are we going to get to the roads that were promised last year?
I'm not sure what road. So we do have a list, and we made it through that pretty much that list this past year. I'm not sure if there's a particular road you're thinking of, but we do publish that list annually, and we actually were pretty much on target this year. Last year was a little different in that there were a couple roads that did go into this year because of last summer we had a significant amount of rainfall continuing into December. So a couple roads from last year were completed this year. I'm not sure if that's a particular road that you're thinking about.
Okay. Is the list progressively, does the road move up on the list, or is it just random how you choose these roads in which order to do?
So we have a whole database that really is an algorithm as to how, and it basically shows based on travel, based on use. We also look at other, it could be utility. If utility needs to be on the street, work with the gas company or the water utility. So that list, it's a list, we maintain a 3 to 5 year list, but then within that, we look to see how to create that 1 year list. Sometimes roads do jump onto that list or jump off that list if for some reason it deteriorated at a different rate. So it's really that 3 to 5 year look ahead. It's not a guarantee every single year because there might be reasons. It could be a utility has to go in, so we want to wait an extra year. There's various reasons that we look into how we select a road, but we do have a database that we manage and use that to help. It's almost like an algorithm that helps select some the top priority roads.
Yeah, the road I was thinking was Kensington Drive. It's been on the list, I think, a couple of years, and doesn't seem like nothing getting done.
Sure. So I can speak to that particular road. So that was on the list, and we did delay it because Kensington Pump Station, which is just about to begin construction this winter, that will be done this winter, and then that should be on this upcoming paving list. That's the plan.
Should be a hopefully.
That is the current plan. So that is, as of right now, we're looking at putting that on next year's list.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Richard Freitas, Precinct 9. I just would like some clarification. Turnpike Road, sidewalks. This meeting has voted previous. The money has been obtained, and from what I understand, that's already there. And is that being included from past money on this expense?
Sure. So we do have some money for Turnpike Road. We also received a complete streets grant in the amount of $500,000 to also advance Turnpike Road sidewalk between Golden Cove and Warren Ave. That is becoming a very costly sidewalk. We have to build a bridge. There's a lot of permitting. It's estimated over $1 million just for that sidewalk. So when I say $2.8 million, that's not entirely coming from free cash or from capital. There are other allocations. So we are looking at a potential delta that we would probably pull a little bit from here to help fulfill the need for that project.
Constantly asked by my constituents about the rest of Turnpike Road, to bring that to your attention. That road is probably one of the most dangerous roads in town, and there's a lot of children in those neighborhoods, and it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous situation. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich Lamontagne, Precinct 11. I have a question about Harvey Road. Is there any consideration to putting speed bumps or anything on that road due to the increased commercial traffic as a result of the construction at Route 4 at the Triangle, what used to be the Triangle?
So it's not in our current plan to add any speed bumps or any other traffic calming, but we do have an application in right now through the state bottleneck reduction grant to look at that intersection of Harvey and Hazen. And if we do receive funding, we look at that intersection and also likely also continue on Harvey and Hazen. So it's a project in the works, but just not on this list.
Thank you. I'd just like to mention that we have constituents in Precinct 11 that have talked to all the reps in Precinct 11 about the increased commercial traffic that goes down because of the redesign of that. So I would encourage you to do something to reduce commercial traffic there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Schultz, Precinct 8, a question. How are the sidewalk priorities decided?
So similar to the pavement management database, we have a whole sidewalk management database which has everything inventoried, and again, it's a whole everything's inventoried, and it's really an algorithm based on proximity to a school or we give priority based on use or proximity to a high pedestrian use. And as far, we have various types of repairs. Sometimes we have point repairs, or we have to upgrade our curb ramps. We try to incorporate those more into our paving program or other miscellaneous work. When we have wholesale sidewalk replacements, that really becomes part of a sidewalk project. Also, we look to see where we can make connections. Sometimes we pair those connections with paving. So right now, Old Westford will be paving part of Old Westford, and we just recently did that new sidewalk. Same with Parkhurst. That was an area for paving, and we'll be putting new sidewalk one in as well.
I had questions on Westford Street, where in front of Worthern, in front of the Congregational Church there were some, I think they were like ADA type ramps put in to a sidewalk that essentially goes nowhere. It ends at Worthern Street, and I thought my constituents had asked about, are they going to be doing more sidewalk after this?
So I'd have to go back and look at the exact detail location, but typically, we do have to end and have a transition, so my guess is it would continue in the future. I'd have to look particularly at Westford Street to see a proposal, but I don't have that in front of me. That's not on this plan right now. Also, Mass DOT is proposing some work on Westford Street, so we are looking to push that off until after their bridge work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Latina, Precinct 9. A question for you on Turnpike. Does that figure include easement or land taking, because you don't have any easements along Turnpike on either side?
No, the $1.1 million is just for construction. There's some, soft cost, permitting costs, but not purchase. So right now we are trying to identify exactly how we find that location and potentially town property.
So you'd have to buy property from neighbors?
We're not looking at buying property right now. We're hopeful to see if we can find it within town property. We're still looking.
For the sidewalk, I'm saying, on Turnpike?
Yes.
Okay. And Anstey Road there, you just replaced half of that street with post-sewer construction.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be maybe looking at taking care of somebody else's street by just doing sections of it? There's parts that are a mess on both, actually on Anstey and Kensington, rather than paving the whole thing.
So we typically, when we do for the sewer, we did some paving. We do want to come in and do the whole roadway. For every repair you do, any seam that you add in the road, that really is a potential point of failure. So I will say in that area where they did the patching, potentially it's just a mill, so we don't have to do any larger repairs or fold up or reclaim. But typically when we go down the street, we like it to be a continuous restoration and not patch, because that seam will likely become the point of failure. Maybe not in 20 years, it could be earlier.
Okay. Jesse's the same way. And the section on Anstey that's really torn up, where it's collapsing, do you actually go down under, or are you just going to grind it and replace it every 10 years?
No, we look at each project to see what the best fit for how we reconstruct it. So we also look at the cross slopes. So we'll take some grades, and if it is unlevel, if it needs any grading, sometimes we can do just milling with spot repairs or spot grading, so leveling. So we have to look at that. We'll look particularly at that location, but we don't just come in and just blindly mill the top 2 inches. We do look at true grades and make sure that we get an adequate cross slope and have drainage going to the appropriate places.
And so you do some subsurface work?
Potentially, yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we will vote on Article 7 to appropriate $2.5 million from free cash to fund roadway and sidewalk construction. A yes vote would be to appropriate the funds. No vote would be against it.
After that series of questions and answers, I think you can see that Christine Clancy, our Department of Public Works Director, really has her finger on the pulse of where everything is, and certainly comes prepared. You knew that she was going to be asked some specifics about certain roadways, and indeed she was, and I think she was ready.
Article passes 116 in favor, 5 opposed, no abstentions. Article 8.
Article 8 is a request to fund $975,000 from free cash, the outdoor recreational playing services at the McCarthy School that's located behind the police station. You may recall there was an article brought before this town meeting 2 years ago to expand the parking at the police station and to transform this area, which the court material is removed. But at the direction of town meeting, you didn't pay paradise and put up a parking lot. And from that meeting, and this shows you it is your meeting, the superintendent of schools, Dr. Jay Lang, assembled a committee that's worked over the last couple of years on this issue periodically, have approved a plan. And why don't we just get to it? This is the updated plan, conceptual plan at this time. Again, the police station is to the top of the slide, and the McCarthy School is to the right. You can see what there would be is there'd be 2 basketball courts to the right of the photo. In the center would be the street hockey or deck hockey, and then to the left it would be a tennis court that could also have lines for pickleball. So as was described earlier, the work that's finishing up at the high school, we've moved are proposing to move the deck hockey over to the middle school, which is actually a better fit because that generally tends to be the age at which the deck hockey is heavily utilized and is actually supported by the Police Athletic League, and and obviously which has a connection and nexus with the police station. So again, this project would restore the traditional court area at McCarthy, and there would be a walkway, as you see on the right-hand side of the passage of the photo illustration, and therefore that would allow a pedestrian access to the police station area. And again, this primarily would be used during the school days for recess, or really phys ed for their programs for the children. But again, after school hours and certainly the summer months, it really does provide enhanced recreational opportunities for the community. Again, it's not an insignificant cost. These are going to be asphalt courts. Really, the cost, a lot of this is that surface areas, particularly on tennis courts, are a costly component to this project. And there also would be fencing and installation of fencing involved into this. So again, this is a project that again reflects the direction we received from town meeting, and we hope that you'll embrace this plan this evening. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Does Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 8.
School Committee have a recommendation. Does the Select Board have a recommendation?
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 8.
Any questions or discussion?
Tom Romero, Precinct 5. Earlier, I heard that at the high school you were putting in some pickleball courts. So I just wanted to know if they're dedicated pickleball courts, or are they just lines on tennis courts like here?
High school is dedicated pickleball courts, and the reason that we put the pickleball courts at the high school is because there aren't neighbors nearby. One of the things that we're seeing in other communities with pickleball is the noise issue arising from, and you probably have seen it in the media as well. So that's why you have that over at the high school. If noise becomes an issue here, then that won't be facilitated here at McCarthy. But clearly, the tennis court doesn't create that issue. The one court that would be proposed at this location. But yes, the dedicated pickleball courts are at the high school. There's also a single pickleball court dedicated over at Varney Playground.
Right.
And we did have an issue when people thought it was a good idea in the summer months to be playing pickleball at 6 in the morning in the daylight. And we quickly heard from the neighbors that that wasn't acceptable. Right. And then we posted our starting hours at 8 a.m. to address that problem. So we're trying to be mindful to the demand for pickleball, but also the concerns that arise from pickleball.
Yeah. No, fully understand the noise issues. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we will vote on Article 8 to approve $975,000 from free cash to fund the construction of outdoor recreational playing surfaces and pedestrian access improvements at the McCarthy Middle School. A yes is in favor, no is opposed.
Everyone seems to be liking the new recreational areas. And you're seeing here a series of articles that are being funded out of that free cash that was so hotly discussed earlier tonight. The free cash is money left over at the end of the fiscal year. Think of it as a surplus, if you will, that remains in the town's control, and the town can either decide to spend that. As was stated, often that goes for one-time uses, or it can put it in the general stabilization fund, or both.
In favor, 12 opposed, 1 abstention. Article 9.
Article 9 is a request for funding from the sewer enterprise retained earnings to replace a sewer force main on Progress Avenue. Public Works Director Christine Clancy is going to present on this article.
So we have an existing 8-inch ductile iron force main on Progress Ave. A lot of our force mains, our age of our sewer system is relatively new, considering New England. We have a total of about 12 miles of sewer force main across all 41 pumping stations that eventually go to Lowell. We do routinely, we're getting into a program where we're routinely inspecting them. Going back a few years, we had a repair at Southwell. Progress Ave is one of our newer force mains, and it is unfortunate, but we had spot repairs January 2024, July 2024, and town meeting couldn't come fast enough. We actually had another one, unfortunately, all relatively in the same location last week. This is right off of Progress Ave. Fortunately, these pipe failures were caught very quickly. We were able to expedite, have a crew on site to make the repair that same day. We did have to go through the proper notifications to DEP. As pictured here, you can see the pipe that was pulled out of the ground. This pipe was installed in 1988. This pipe should really last another 20, 30 years. It is very pitted, deteriorated. Potentially something's happening with the soil. It could be inside the pipe, but we're suspecting that it's something corroding the pipe quicker than typical. So we really, given that there's 3 emergency repairs that occurred, we really need to do a longer replacement. So this proposal is to replace 800 linear feet of pipe, because previously we had looked to see where there's a better section of pipe. Our superintendent, sewer superintendent, Dan Belkis, he's the one that came forward to me and said, I think we can actually save the town money and do this in-house. This is a relatively shallow force main compared to some of our other force mains in town, about 6 feet deep. So the proposal for this is about still $125,000, but we'd be saving the town at least $150,000, not having to go to bid. With this approval, we would begin as soon as possible, so maybe even the next few weeks, and we would propose to put in HDPE pipe, fused HDPE pipe, similar to the plastic pipe that you see, the yellow plastic pipe you see the gas company install. And this will, and I am asked a lot, we are going into a program where we're going to monitor all the piping across the town. I hope this is more of just a unique situation where the soil is corrosive, but we have a program where we'll continually monitor all the force mains in town.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 9.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 9.
Anyone have any questions or discussion?
Precinct 8. What's a force main?
Sorry, a sewer force main is when it conveys sewer between pump stations or to the Lowell treatment plant. It is pressurized. So a lot of the sewer in town is by gravity, but these are pressurized. So our force mains vary in size between 4 inches in diameter to 60 inches in diameter. This is 8 inches, so it's relatively small, but it's still a good size.
Badru, Precinct 11. Thank you for the details. Do you know approximately how many linear foot of 1988, 1990, 1992 this particular class is embedded in town? Just as a rough.
So
rough
don't know if we don't know if this section of pipe, if it is just the soil or corroded, but this line, Progress Ave, I think is 2,300 feet, but we believe we can connect to a good piece of pipe up 800 feet. So this project is to replace 800 feet, but we're like I said, we'll make sure we connect to a good piece of pipe. We're confident that 800 feet, it seems like it's, look just when you excavate it, it's not as pitted. So yeah, this project is 800 feet of a 2,300 foot section.
But do you know overall in town how much?
Yeah, we have 12 miles of force mains between 4 inches in diameter and 16 inches in diameter.
Material.
Oh, so almost all of our piping is cast iron or is steel. So we are looking at when we replace, we'll probably head towards this fused HDPE, which is a relatively newer. I think going back 30 years, this is what they use. They didn't use the fused plastic.
Understood. You also mentioned this has gone through some corrosion. Obviously, from the picture, it's very corroded. Will this be sent off for some kind of an analysis? Just to understand.
So I have the soil sitting in my office, and I am getting the soil sampled.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we'll vote on Article 9 to transfer $125,000 from the Sioux Enterprise Fund retained earnings to replace the sewer force main pipe on Progress Ave. Yes is to vote in favor, no is opposed.
Just want to point out there is something that you don't see a lot here at town meeting, which is a unanimous yes for Article 9.
Article passes unanimously, 120 in favor, no opposition or abstention. Article 10.
Article 10 is another public works, this case in the sewer, infiltration and inflow. We're proposing to transfer $650,000 from the sewer enterprise fund retained earnings to address infiltration and inflow. And once again, our public works director, Christine Clancy, will provide the presentation.
So many of you must have heard, or probably have heard, our sewer system is at capacity. It is relative to rainfall or inflow, and we do track that. So we are tracking on a monthly basis, and historically going back the past few years, especially last year, where we had higher rainfall amounts, we were over capacity. Here is just a chart just to show the 87 million gallons a month that we have. That's our capacity. All of our sewer goes to Duck Island. We are unable to easily add flow or add capacity. So what we're doing is looking at ways to reduce the amount of inflow or infiltration that enters our sewer system. And we have various programs that are going on. You might have heard of sump pump removal program. We did pilot that. We recently had a smoke testing program to identify sources of infiltration. In 2023, we did a sewer system analysis of about 12% of our system just to see where else we could find infiltration. And we did find infiltration. Our system, like I said, is relatively new. So a lot of the sources of infiltration are happening at the manhole, where the pipe meets the manhole or other spaces within the manhole. So we identified 200 manholes that would need lining or rehabilitation to basically make that a tighter seal so that we don't have infiltration coming into our sewer system. Estimating about 20,000 gallons we remove out of the system. And this project is ready to go to bid. If approved, it would be the $650,000. That's the estimated construction, and we would begin it submittals this fall and potentially beginning this work this winter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 10.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 10.
Any questions? There being none, we'll vote on Article 10 to appropriate $650,000 from the Sewer Enterprise Fund retained earnings to correct, remedy, repair, and prevent and prohibit infiltration and inflow into the sewer system. Passes unanimously, 118 in favor, no opposition or abstentions. Article 11.
Article 11 is not a public works article. This is a digital documentation article in which we've, in the past, have made some initial investments in this, and now we're really taking the step forward with today's technology to make our access to our records manageable and accessible. So this evening's presentation is going to be presented by the Town Clerk's Office Departmental Support Coordinator, Harrison Mayon.
Good evening, town meeting representatives. My name is Harrison Mayon. I am the Departmental Support Coordinator for the Town Clerk's Office, presenting to you regarding Article 11. Looking at the past, where we've been, what we've been working on, the Town Clerk's Office has been working to improve the preservation of the town's historical records for the last several years, including environmental and physical preservation efforts. These efforts have involved more space-efficient shelving being installed, implementation of climate controls, and restoration of high-risk historical records. During the restoration of these high-risk historical records, the Northeast Document Conservation Center scanned these records, and they are available on Internet Archive or the town website, but are not easily searchable in their current format. The building department, as you can see in the image here, the building department is facing some space constraints. This image was taken from in their office. You can see the large rolling shelves take up significant space in their office. The goal with the building department space will be to free up the area used by these shelves and relocate the records that are there to a more spacious and controlled environment. The LL03 storage area in the town offices has more capacity for these records and presents an opportunity for better organization and consolidation of land use related files. Even with organized physical records, locating specific files, particularly older ones, can be a slow and inefficient process. Staff spend valuable time searching through paper records, which can delay internal workflows and responses to public requests. With a strong document management system, all digitized records will be indexed and searchable, allowing staff and the public to locate documents instantly online with no risk compared to handling the physical record. The goals for this project include digitization of permanent departmental records, ensuring digitized records are fully searchable for easy retrieval for staff and the public, consolidating building, planning, and zoning files in one space, and clearing space in the building department's office. Our request for free cash from fiscal 25 is $300,000, which would fund the estimated initial implementation fee. Oh, I'm sorry. Estimated implementation fee, the building planning and zoning scanning, which is approximately 1.87 million pages, including large format maps, accounting phase 1, which is about 1 million pages, and fire prevention, approximately 17,500 pages. Looking into the future, we intend to scan permanent records across the town's departments and create efficiencies across all functions. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 11.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 11.
Hi, just one question. All the hard
Ms.
copies.
Dressler, please
Yes, I'm sorry.
identify
Doreen
yourself.
Dessler, Precinct 9. The hard copies, are they going to be destroyed or are they still going to be kept somewhere?
Some may. I know for the building department files specifically, those would be merged into the LL03 storage area, and so all of the planning, building, and zoning files would be kept in one space as opposed to in the two different rooms that they are now.
Okay, so they'll still be kept, the hard copies. Okay, good. Thank you.
John Fall, Precinct 7. Mr. Speaker, to you, to the presenter. Is there any time frame on this overall? Do you have any idea how long it will take to get all these documents on digital?
So for the scope of this project, the idea would be between a year and a half. We've only quoted a portion of the project for a rough estimate of the price. The rest of the project, it's unclear, depending on the vendor that we select, what the exact timeline would be.
You can start the clock, but it'll only take me a second. I think this is something that really we should do. The record's very important to the town, and I highly recommend we do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
You said it, and you also indicated on there was phase 1. What is the estimated cost of the entire project?
So for accounting's files, that was a rough estimate. I'm not certain of the exact volume of their remaining files. I don't know if the town accountant would be able to provide a more clear answer as to the full scope of their records.
It's probably about 4 times this. This is basically our initial foray into this. But we're going to keep generating records, and eventually the goal is, just like everywhere else, to be fully paperless in terms of doing online applications for the building department and so forth. But to really get caught up to speed is probably another 3 or 4 years. But again, it's going to depend upon the funding availability on how to move this forward. So I would say the full cost is probably like 4 times the amount here. You're over $1 million because we've got records, particularly accounting records, payroll records, and treasury records that we want to have. And then the beauty of it, the end of it is it's then achievable and searchable. So you could be able to go into a property at X street and be able to obtain all the records for buildings and so forth, which is sort of what should be the norm and will be the norm in the years ahead. So, but this is sort of the first venture in terms of what today's technology, and we've all seen the advances in AI and everything else, but we expect that this will probably be the first of about 3 or 4 iterations, and then an ongoing support and maintenance as records continue to be developed.
I apologize for using the phrase you asked not to, but am I correct? This is about a $2.5 million project total.
I think that's a little high. Right now we're asking $300,000, and then you're probably 1.5. I would say when you go from soup to nut at the end, probably in the year 2030 or so, whenever this is sort of then becomes a steady state. I would think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Glenn Thorne, Precinct 7. I hope these are easy questions. I assume you're using some collection software to put all these records into it, and who is actually doing the work on taking these records and putting it into the software? Is the town doing it, or do we have a contractor?
So a vendor would be selected through the state's procurement laws, whether it's from a state contract or out to bid, but a vendor would be selected both for the software portion and for performing the scanning work.
And I noticed on the page you're showing there some interesting squiggles and stuff. I think it's what they call cursive. Some of us are familiar with that, but is the intention to take these squiggles and make them into searchable letter formations like text?
That would be part of the plan, and as I mentioned, when the Northeast Document Conservation Center was scanning some of these records, while they did scan, and we have high-quality scans of these files, they weren't indexed at the time, so part of the idea would be as we move them into the document management system, that indexing would be done to make it easily searchable for those who may not be able to read the cursive on that image.
Okay, that's a minor concern, because I would like to be able to search cursive documents. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Bruce Rosen, Precinct 5A. Question on the first slide is certain historical volumes would need restoration. Can you clarify further what restoration would be like, or what would be done?
So the historic restoration of the vital records has already been undertaken in prior projects. The town clerk would be able to speak more to the specifics of those prior projects. Are you looking for more specific information on those?
As the percentage of the cost, is it 1%, which we don't care, or significant?
All of the historic restoration has taken place. That's already done, completed, fully funded, and work completed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we'll vote on Article 11 to transfer $300,000 from free cash to digitize and manage public records. A yes is in favor. No is opposed. Article passes 113 in favor, 0 no votes, and 1 abstention. Article 12.
Article 12 is a request to transfer $75,000 from free cash to begin a program on addressing tree and invasive species inventory and management. And our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, whose department is going to oversee this program, will provide the presentation.
So we have in the past looked at ways to move forward with this program. We have applied to a couple grants. We've just been not successful. This has been talked a lot, I know, at Tree Committee, and also it's been brought to our attention at DPW a lot, Conservation Commission. We have a declining canopy, and the estimate is approximately 1% a year, so which is pretty significant. If you looked us back at the past 10 years, that's 10% of our tree canopy in town is being lost. Some of it is storm damage, some of it is natural, but a lot of it, as you see here pictured, here's a picture at Warren Pole. This is also, there's a threat from invasives, strangling trees, so that also has a threat to our canopy. There are many other communities that have had similar programs or similar projects. So looking at some other neighboring communities, we looked at an opportunity to how do we start this program. Also, just this past summer, I think I alone received over 10 calls or emails from residents saying, I have knotweed on my property, how do I get rid of it? I have bittersweet. So there's over 400 species just that we know of invasive species that are threatening to our canopy and to our properties. So with this proposal, the $75,000, we would write a proposal, hire a consultant to look at approximately 20 miles of roadway, do an inventory, evaluate the trees in that area of the right-of-way, and also look at where we take inventory of invasives and how best to manage that. We right now do not have written protocol for how we do manage that. And like I said, I get calls many times, and also we have our own infrastructure, so not only just for residents. Also, I just want to highlight, I also had some interest from the schools in partnering with the youth or some students on helping promote this, which I think is a great project and a great opportunity. So it's something also we would look to coordinate on. And aside from the right-of-way, I think it's also important to look at some properties. So pictured here, Warren Pole, or I know of Coolest Farm. And so we would want to do some pilots on some town-owned properties to also come up with an inventory assessment and a plan of how we manage invasive species on this. This really is becoming a hot topic, not just in our regionally and nationally. Thank you.
Thank you. The Finance Committee have a recommendation.
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 12.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 12.
Any questions?
Phil Stanway, Precinct 5A. I've been battling invasives for 20 years in this town, in all sections of it. And I was wondering, you just mentioned 2 sites. Would you be doing private sites, like land trust sites, or any of the farms? Because some of the sites go up to 10 inches in vines that we've been cutting.
So the scope has to be clearly scoped. The plan is to do that with the tree committee. The idea is to do, like I had estimated, about 20 miles of roadway, but also potentially some pilot projects. But the idea is some of these pilot projects could be used for other, basically we would develop a standard protocol for some other locations, whether it be a resident calling, how do they take care of a certain species, or potentially a private property. So there's potential opportunity. I guess the scope's still developed. Right now the intent is a couple town properties and about 20 miles of roadway.
Thank you. The next question. Clearing invasives is, well, it's not easy, it's hard and it's expensive. But unless you maintain it continuously after that, within just a few years, it comes back stronger, meaner, and nastier. Will this plan lay out something that the town will use to maintain areas that they have cleaned so they don't return to their pre-nasty states?
So this plan will do the assessment and outline, I guess, right, any plan has a maintenance plan. So this will lay out a maintenance plan. looking at, we'll have to look at funding, how to fund that moving forward. But yes, the intent is anything we're doing also needs to be maintained. And that's what we're seeing is a lot of projects that we're getting into related to invasives or tree management is that we do need to look at not just immediately, but looking at it looks at least 5 years. Sometimes it can be longer.
For me, for 20 years of doing this project out there, fighting this, and if I can hold my own, I'm happy. So this is long overdue because it's just killing our trees in this town, destroying them. When you see 10-inch vines pulling down old growth trees in town, it's sad. So I commend this and I support this.
Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 8. So the thing about invasive species is...
Nancy, is this a question? Or
this is a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Okay.
But it's a prefix to a question. So the thing about invasive species is they're invasive. And you can't do a management plan on town property. You can't manage them on town property if you're also not managing them on the adjacent private properties. So I understand that that's not the financial responsibility of the town. However, my question to you is, could this management plan include a guide for residents on managing invasives on their properties? Because we really need it.
Yes, so there will be, part of that, I think it's important, is some type of public outreach component, whether it be a guide. Also, we can use other sources through town newsletters, social media. So yes, but I think a guide is important because that's the thing. I alone got, I can say 10 calls, but other people too. And so I want people at DPW or town manager's office to be able to say, here's a pamphlet on our guide. We don't have that right now. So that would be one of the goals of the assessment.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, you can start. It has to be cooperative.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Voting on Article 12 to transfer $75,000 from free cash for tree and invasive species inventory and management plan. Article passes 116 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstention. Article 14.
Article 14 is a request to transfer $100,000 from free cash to perform the schematic design for the partial roof replacement of the Southborough Elementary School. As noted in the motion, the town has applied for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority under the Accelerated Repair Program that the state provides. We have not received, as of this time, a funding determination from the state. We believe our project is favorable. What we also understand in terms of the school schedule is if we are invited into the program, the challenge is you have to complete the appropriation within 120 days of the notification of award. And since we only have town meeting every 6 months, the reason we're taking this vote sort of in anticipation is because we know the roof work has to be done, and in the event that we're not in the program, we'll have to decide whether to apply again in the subsequent year or to begin some work unilaterally. This is a significant project for the town. It's about $1.2 million of effort, and we really want to incur this project, and our Public Works Director, Christine Clancy, is just going to provide the overview on what, as we talked about it earlier, but just give you the final overview of what's involved with this project.
So we do inspections annually of all of our roofs in town, 28 buildings, including the schools, and that is updated annually to really highlight any more repairs needed or considering for replacements. A lot of our infrastructure, including especially our buildings, are about the same age. I mean, our schools are high school being one of the newest facility. The South Row School roof is 26 years old. Oops, sorry. Is 26 years old. For MSBA eligibility, you have to be over 25 years to be eligible. So we thought this was a perfect project to apply for it. This project includes about 40,000 square feet of replacement. There are solar panels on the roof roofs, so those were installed in 2014. So as part of that project, the solar panels have to be taken off and put back on. We anticipate another 10 years of life expectancy on those solar panels. This project would be scheduled for the summer of 2026 if we move forward with the funding. And MSBA reimbursement is anticipated about 50% of that overall project. In terms of project cost, we're estimating about $1.2 million. From the roof assessment that was done this year, they estimate years remaining. It's about 0 to 2, really essentially it's at the need of replacement. And we do, one more item is, I know earlier it was asked how do we come up with the $100,000, so just around 10% of a project cost just for some initial design. In looking at MSBA for some cost estimates, that was relatively comparable to some of the information available on the MSBA website. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 14.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 14.
Anyone have any questions?
Badri Upilapan, Precinct 11. Quick question on the solar panels. What is the year of, which year were they installed?
So these solar panels, so as pictured here, really the entire area that has solar panels is part of the replacement in one of the modular units. So those were installed in 2014, and we do estimate another 10 years. We will look at the light, by taking them off and putting them back on, the cost of replacement, but our initial understanding likely is it's a remove, and what we're seeing in other communities is a remove and reset.
Okay, so did I understand correctly, but you'll also look at remove and replace?
Yes, we will look at that cost, but right now our current $1.2 million is looking at a remove and reset.
Understood, but as part of that, would you also be, is the roof schematics involving looking at structural enhancements to be done so that in the next revision that you're looking at for the 10 years beyond, when newer panels that may be slightly heavier but more powerful for the same footprint may be able to be loaded onto the same, otherwise we would have to come in and do structural enhancements at that time?
Sure. So any part of the feasibility study, whether it be removing resetting panels, I assume would have a structural analysis. The exact scope of the feasibility study will be vetted out, but we do know we have to look at removing and resetting panels, but we just want to look at the option of replacing. So I guess it's not written into the scope, but that is our intention.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being no one, we will.
Tom Amaro, Precinct 5. Yeah, maybe you should. Question. Have you thought about painting the roof white and using bifacial panels to maximize the output if you replace them?
We're not there yet, so we have to really start. So that would be part of the feasibility study to see what options are out there. But we're just right now. This is just a need, a need that we have to do replacement. So we haven't really dug into the scope. But that would be part of looking into options.
Okay, because if there are options for recycling panels or reselling them, so they can after 10 years they'll have a lot of life left. But the current panels today are so much more powerful, and with the bifacial and the reflective, light, they can produce even more. So I'm just hoping that you'll try to maximize the potential output. the new roof, on the new panels.
Thank you. Anyone else? There being none, we vote on Article 14 to transfer $100,000 from free cash to be expended under the direction of the town manager for the schematic design of the partial roof replacement at South Row Elementary School. Article passes 112 in favor of, 3 no votes, and no abstentions. Article 15.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Article 15 is the final article for the allocation of free cash. It's to transfer the balance of $560,482 from free cash to the General Stabilization Fund. As was noted earlier, we have $15.3 million in our fund currently. It's roughly 9.4% of our operating budget. Our policy is between 5 and 10% of our general operating revenue should be held in reserve. And basically, at this point, if we put that funding in, we'd probably at 9.8%. And much like the state and other municipalities, during this period of high inflation and cost restrictions, we're keeping our cash reserves to prepare for the upcoming future. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. How does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 15.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 15.
Any discussion? There being none, we will vote on Article 15 to transfer funds to the Stabilization Fund. Article passes 110 in favor of, 4 no votes, no abstentions. Article 16, we're going to start first thing Thursday morning so that you're fresh and, more importantly, that I'm fresh. Article 17 has already been done as part of the consent agenda, so we'll move on to Article 18.
Sure. Article 18 is a Community Preservation Fund article that's supported unanimously by the Community Preservation Fund Committee. This is to fund a request from the Chelmsford Housing Authority Choice, and our Executive Director, David Hedison, is going to make the presentation on this article to appropriate $2.6 million to revitalize, refresh, renew the housing over at the corner of 1 Smith Street at the intersection of Stedman and Smith Street. David?
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Hedison. I'm the Director of the Chelmsford Housing Authority. It's great to be back here and see a number of familiar faces. This is year number 30 as Director. I love this community. I love our senior housing that we have. Chelmsford Arms is 1969, a year older than myself. And as we talk tonight about capital needs and capital improvements, there are $8 billion of need across the state of Massachusetts, and with a new bond bill that was recently passed, we'll see $3 billion over the next 5 years flow to the state public housing that exists in the state. Chelmsford Arms is our oldest development. We have 32 units in one building, 32 units in another building, and in the center we have the community center with the laundry. Years back, I applied for a grant to renovate the building, and the state rejected it because they recognize that this building is obsolete and needs to be redeveloped. We have received $17 million for McFarland Manor next to Town Hall, and that building is currently vacant. We anticipate breaking ground on the complete gut reno at McFarland Manor in the next, by the end of this year. And it will allow us to transfer the residents at Chelmsford Arms over to a brand new McFarland Manor by the end of 2026, 2027. So, with this opportunity of McFarland Manor being completely renovated, it will allow us to look at Chelmsford Arms. This new building, which we are proposing, will go from 64 units to an additional 32. It's currently 2 stories. We'd be looking to go to 3 stories. Instead of tearing down trees or building somewhere else in town, we can actually redevelop this site and expand the opportunities for the seniors that are currently waiting at least 3 to 5 years. So this $2.6 million will go towards the 32 new units that will be built. The whole site will be bulldozed and redeveloped, and we're looking at a cost of about $43 million, and we're looking at 5% of the cost coming from community preservation. The great thing about this is McFarland Manor, the $17 million is being paid for 100% by the state. When we get to this site, because we're going to be adding units to this site, we have to come up with another source of income to offset the costs. So working with community preservation in the town, we have a requirement that 10% of what we generate from community preservation goes towards affordable housing. With Chelmsford Woods coming off the bond, we will need to have another project in the wings. So with this project, the $2.6 million bonded, we'll take care of the 10% over the next 10 years. I'm happy to take questions on this project.
Thank you. Does the Select Board, Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 18.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 18.
Questions and discussion?
Hi, Doreen Deschler, Precinct 9. Just one question. How many units are there in McFarland, are going to be in McFarland?
We have 48, and there'll be 48.
48. Okay, so the people from Smith Street are going to move into McFarland?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I assume Badru Precinct 11. I assume this new building will be to the new building codes or net zero standards for the benefit and health of senior citizens coming online?
Beyond that,
Thank you.
we're going to passive house standards.
We'll talk.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so let's vote on Article 18 to appropriate $2.6 million for the creation of community housing and authorize the Treasurer, Select Board to borrow funds, Chapter 44 and 44B, General Laws.
Thank you.
Article passes 105 in favor, 3 opposed, no abstentions. Article 19.
Article 19 is a request to grant an easement from the town through its school committee to the Chelmsford Water District across an area that goes through the Parker Middle School, the high school, McCarthy, and the admin building. The motion you have in front of you is what you have in your packet, although council caught a omission this morning, which is sort of the 5th word in to the end of the second line, basically transferring the care, custody, and control and management of the portions of the property described below from the school committee for school purposes to the school committee for these purposes of granting the easements, and then so forth as written in your packet. Basically what's going on here, and you'll see a whole series of engineering maps, but basically what's going on here is the water district has to transport water for treatment from the Smith Street wells to the Crooked Spring Road treatment plant. And they could do it through the conventional roadway right-of-ways. However, they will save a significant amount of money by sort of putting the easement across the school properties. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Finance Committee have a recommendation.
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 19.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommend approval of Article 19.
School Committee have a recommendation on this?
The school committee unanimously approved the granting of the easements.
Thank you. Questions? Concerns? There being none, we'll vote on Article 19. To grant an easement to the school committee.
Are you frozen?
The screen froze. I thought that last second was really long.
We paid this guy to come out here so we wouldn't have this problem. That's why I want to see
Well,
if
depending on what he
Okay, here we go.
Okay, let's vote again.
Okay, that's all right. No, I want to, because we want to get to the root, like, what is it that caused the problem? I don't know.
Article passes 102 in favor, 1 negative vote, and no abstentions. Article 20, and there is an amendment to this article, so let's hear it.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, Article 20, which is the last article that will be considered this evening, is a transfer of care, custody, and control of certain town-owned parcels from the Select Board to the Conservation Commission in order to put them under the protections of state law, which is basically Article 97 of the Massachusetts Constitution as conservation lands. And I'll go through the list of parcels. As you can see, there is 6 parcels. The first one is the Warren Pole land, located at 95 Boston Road. Excuse me. Here it is here. This is the parcel here, Warren Pole. Over 4 years ago, in August of 2020, the town approved the acquisition of Warren Pole property. Since that time, the property has been improved and really is an established conservation use under basically the supervision that's been allocated and assigned to the Conservation Commission. At this point, we're in the process of finalizing a conservation restriction on the property under the provisions of the Community Preservation Act. The community has to impose a conservation restriction on all properties acquired for open space purposes under the funding from the Community Preservation Act. That's provided for under state law because the state also contributes to this project. That preservation restriction is in its final stages. There have been periodic updates to the select board. We know there's been some concerns, and it may be the concerns of the amendment, which this evening about the preservation of the meadow. I can assure you that I've seen the language of the latest draft of the restriction. The language regarding the preservation of the meadow has been agreed to. Right now, the issues that are holding this up don't pertain to that. So basically, we're looking at this point, given that the property is now in active use for 4 years, in accordance with the plans by the family who made the land offer available to the town, as well as the butters who want to convey the land from the select board to the Conservation Commission. And regardless of whether it occurs or not, the preservation restriction will be continue to be developed and finalized by the Conservation Commission and presented to the select board for signatures. The other parcels, these two by the Country Club, these are parcels that are covered by, obtained by the town by foreclosure, and basically are wet, and that's how the town gets to acquire these. So you can see where the yellow text there, the Country Club is the main parcel up there, and you can see that little rectangle where it's 117,449.1. That land was acquired in 2013 for, again, tax foreclosure. It's 0.23 acres. It's all wetlands as shown in there, and it has no value. And over the years, the town has conveyed such parcels to the Conservation Commission as the stewards of conservation land because it has no value on the market and no practical use. The parcel beneath it, between the wording of 117,449.1 and 449.2 is a 3.9 acre parcel. You can see all the wetlands as shown in the green hatch mark there. That was actually acquired in 1995 with the purchase of the golf course. And when we were reviewing parcels, we basically said, well, that land is never going to be used for the golf course. Let's include this in the list for conveyance purposes. You now move over to property off of Hunt Road by Beaver Brook. And as I mentioned, it's by Beaver Brook, and that's why, the town has this parcel. It's wet, not developable. It's 3.4 acres, which is the 405-2. That, again, was acquired in 2010 as a tax foreclosure. And then the one adjacent to it, 405-3, which is 1.15 acres. And the reason that they become foreclosures is they built all the houses on all the lots that they could get approved through subdivision control, and then basically the developer just no longer pays the taxes because there is no developable market for the property, and then the town acquires it through tax foreclosure. And again, there's no resale value, so now we're going to put it under conservation. And then the last parcel is that little triangle you can see by the 91,378.14. It's an orphan parcel there. It's totally wet. It's next to the highway right-of-way. It's 0.22 acres, again, acquired in 2011 by tax foreclosure. It was part of the original Spiro Vrujas property, the egg farm that was out there. And again, we're adding it to our collection of conservation lands to the community. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation?
The Finance Committee unanimously recommends approval of Article 20.
Select Board have a recommendation.
The Select Board unanimously recommends approval of Article 20.
Okay, there is an amendment, so we will hear from the amendor. Yeah, no, just tell us your amendment.
Phil Stanway, Precinct 5A. My amendment is to remove Warren Paul from this. Pardon? Oh, my amendment is to remove Warren Paul from this article. I've been involved heavily with conservation for 20 years, so I know quite a bit about it. The concern is Blanchard's Meadow. Blanchard's Meadow existed before 1672, and that meadow is one of the reasons we purchased the property. And a CR was to be put on it, and there is not an agreement with the land trust. I spoke to directors, I am a director myself this morning, and there is no agreement and there is concern. And what the amendment is for is we're asking that we not remove it completely, but we postpone it till the spring when we have a signed document in black and white and we know the meadow is protected. And that's really the beginning and end of it. We can't lose more history like this. And we're not going to lose anything waiting till the spring. So what's there to lose? But I think we need to see it as a body, that it says this is protected. I've always heard, we will do this, we might do this. And over the years, will and might has not turned out to be we have. And this time with this conservation restriction, I want to see we have.
Thank you. Does the Conservation Commission have a recommendation on the original article?
The Conservation Commission recommends approval of the original article.
Does the Conservation Commission have a position on the amendment?
There is, we have an agreement with the Land Trust on the conservation restriction. We have an approval from the Select Board for the conservation restriction as it was in, I think it was July, might have been June. In the meantime, we have a new town council, so we've asked our new town council to look at the conservation restriction and give us any recommendations for any changes. I don't expect any changes relative to the meadow wording or anything like that. It would strictly be whatever they come up with. We have a call on Thursday with town council on this, and we'll go through whatever changes they have to make on that. And we will decide if we want to make any more changes, if we'll just take it the way it is.
Thank you. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation regarding the amendment, if you know?
The Finance Committee has not had an opportunity to meet regarding this amendment, therefore has no recommendation one way or the other.
Select Board?
Same answer.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion?
On comments of the previous speaker, I spoke to the president of the Land Trust, and as of our meeting last Tuesday, we do not have an agreement. The Land Trust itself is unsure, and they're deciding whether or not they want to continue with this. So there is no agreement, and because of the changes with the new lawyers. So the general consensus was that we should wait till the spring.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Will Wagner, Precinct 3. The representative of the Conservation Commission said that there was no intention to change any of the agreements, but as the amendment presenter pointed out, intentions can change, and I agree with the presenter of the amendment that holding off until spring when we can get the wording down in writing and fixed doesn't hurt anything and potentially helps. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm not sure who to address it to. My name's Claire Janot, Precinct 4. I don't understand the role of the Land Trust and whether they can choose to not accept the restriction.
Sure, Mr. Moderator, through you. Lands acquired through the Community Preservation Fund, as I said earlier, have to have a permanent restriction. That means that a disinterested qualified third party has to hold that restriction. Chelmsford traditionally has utilized the Chelmsford Land Conservation to assume that function at no cost to the town, although we are paying the legal costs for the development of this restriction. So that's how it's required under state law in terms of what takes place. But at the end of the day, the town paid $1.8 million for this property. The Land Trust paid $0. And their role is to enforce the restriction. And we have this in place, whether it's Red Wing Farm, Sunny Meadow Farm, Sheehan Land, and so forth. A third party enforces it to ensure that the lands are continued in their prescribed use as voted by town meeting under the Community Preservation Act for its intended purpose. I guess I'd ask town council if there's any further thing he'd wish to elaborate on in terms of a third party holding a restriction under the Community Preservation Act.
I mean, there's really nothing more for me to elaborate on that. As the manager indicated, it is a requirement. And historically, Chelmsford has used this particular land trust. But someone would need to hold a disinterested third party.
And what is the harm in waiting till the restriction is completed before we vote on this?
There's no harm, but also it's not related. Town meeting doesn't vote the restriction. That's, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, the restriction is authorized and required under state law. The Select Board has asked the Conservation Commission to draft the restriction. They've engaged the Land Trust on this. Whether or not this is approved, not approved, amended, not amended, at the end of the day, the document's going to be presented by the Conservation Commission to the Select Board for approval. It then has to get submitted to the Commonwealth before any final signatures are done because, as I mentioned, it's a requirement under state law. So this is where we are with this project. In the event that we weren't able to reach agreement with the Land Trust, my sense is the Commission and the town would go find another third party. In fact, we're probably going to do that with Coolest Land because we've been told by the Land Trust they're not interested in holding the restriction on the Coolest property. And that at the end of the day, it's going to be approved by the town, the restriction holder, and then ultimately approved by the state. Once the state gives its approval, then the documents are executed and recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Alvin Draymond, Precinct 7. I do not fully understand this issue, and I don't think probably any of us do because we haven't read the details of what is and isn't involved with the meadow. Therefore, perhaps this should be the amendment should be supported so that we can have more details at the spring meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy Arroway, Precinct 8. You can start the clock. It's an opinion. When we voted to purchase Warren Pole, I, for one, don't feel that where this has gone was any way matching what my expectations for that property were when I voted on it. So in voting to transfer this into a stable holding maintenance plan, I would certainly like this time to really know what it is that's happening to that property. So I would absolutely support waiting till spring to add Warren Pole to moving to the Conservation Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, we'll vote on the amendment first. A yes vote would be to approve the amendment, which would remove the Warren Pole land from the basic warrant article. The amendment passes, so now we're going to vote on the article as amended, which means it is the article that includes all the other property except Warren Pole. And this requires a 2/3 vote. The article passes 101 in favor, 1 no vote, no abstentions. I will entertain a motion to adjourn until Thursday, October 24th at 7:30 at this building. Do I hear a second? All in favor? Any opposed?
And so with a resounding yay, we postponed until Thursday night with only one article remaining on the warrant, and that would be the one involving the rehabilitation of two of the town's fire stations. We did finish a little early than we normally would on the first night of town meeting. We did get through quite a few articles. I think the one that took a lot of time, and I think it was time well spent, was the citizen petition by Paul Ragazio to use a different funding mechanism for a feasibility study for replacement for Parker School. That had been proposed to be funded out of the free cash, the leftover cash from the end of the last fiscal year, and that was his proposal as opposed to getting out a loan for it. You know, it was an interesting discussion, and I think we learned a lot. We also learned, just tongue-in-cheek a little bit, that Parkhurst Road had never really been fully approved by the state, and that has now been taken care of. And a number of other housekeeping bills. We learned a lot from Christine Clancy about the workings of the Department of Public Works, actually, tonight. So we invite you to come back on Thursday night to see what happens regarding the fire stations. This is an important topic. It involves about $25 million of expenditure with a Prop 2.5 override, essentially. I encourage you to find sources for the information about this, understand why the study committee, which has been meeting on this for 3 years, still wants to do it, finds it important to do. And I hope to see you back on Thursday night. Until then, this is Kelly Beatty thanking you on behalf of all the volunteers and staff at Chelmsford TeleMedia for watching tonight. See you on Thursday.